Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle. Chapter 201. Draw one sword. Although there weren't many students in the Hawk Palace, it caused a huge commotion. For a moment, the shout actually reached the outside. Even the students who were watching Musweki at the entrance were shocked. What happened inside? Musweki felt strange and said, "Let's go in and take a look." Junior brothers and sisters naturally wouldn't reject this proposal. Everyone gathered around and walked into the Hawk Palace. Inside the Hawk Palace, Xiang Nan pushed the word Sun Peak to the top of the Hawk rankings. He was also very excited, and was anxious to tell his master the good news. He ran out. The people on both sides collided face to face. Xiang Nan. Jiang Yunfan saw Xiang Nan for the first time. "Senior brother Yunfan, I'll treat you to a drink another day." Xiang Nan hastily greeted Jiang Yunfan. Musweki also saw Xiang Nan, but she only took a quick glance and did not leave a deep impression. "What are you shouting for?" Jiang Yunfan and the others brushed past Xiang Nan at the door. After entering the Hawk Palace, they asked the cheering disciples curiously. "It's senior brother Yunfan. You've also come to our Hawk Palace. Look! Look at the ranking of the Hawk Palace." Jiang Yunfan and Musweki exchanged glances. Both of them had just arrived at the Eagle rankings for no apparent reason, and both of them looked at the Eagle rankings together. At first, no one saw anything, but as their gazes moved up, they saw the first place, Sun's Peak. "My God! It's Xiang Nan." Jiang Yunfan laughed out loud. "I knew I wasn't mistaken about this kid." There was nothing to doubt, Sun Peak was only a disciple like Xiang Nan. "Oh." Musweki's expression also changed. "As far as I know, Sun Peak hasn't been ranked on the Eagle rankings for many years. The moment it appeared, it directly ascended to the first place. Could it be that the one who ran out just now was Xiang Nan? He is already a junior brother of the second grade academy at such a young age." Jiang Yunfan laughed loudly. "Second grade? Xiang Nan is only a student of first grade academy. So powerful." Musweki was also shocked and said, "Unfortunately, I didn't know that they were cheering because of this matter just now. Otherwise, I would have known little junior brother Xiang Nan. There are plenty of opportunities." "I brought Xiang Nan back," Jiang Yunfan said smugly. "Look at your pride." Musweki shook her head helplessly. "Sun Peak. Master. I've reached the top." As soon as Xiang Nan ran to the entrance of Sun Palace, he shouted loudly, "Master, our Sun Peak has stepped onto the first place on the Eagle rankings." Su Kaiyu silently appeared at the door. She glanced at Xiang Nan and said indifferently, "I see." Xiang Nan clenched his fists and said excitedly, "Don't worry. When I enter the third grade academy in the future, I will definitely put Sun Peak at the top of the Tiger rankings." "I see." Su Kaiyu nodded lightly and turned around to go back. Xiang Nan had expected Master's indifferent reaction, so he wasn't disappointed. But at this moment, a strong light suddenly pierced through the sky and flew towards the entrance of the Haran sect. "Huh!" Xiang Nan was stunned. Looking at the source of the light, he said, "It's in the direction of the Nature Palace." As soon as he finished speaking, a large amount of dense light suddenly appeared in the sky. Each ray of light was an elder of the Haran Palace, and the group of elders flew towards the gate of the sect. "Something big has happened." Su Tsayue's expression changed as she quickly turned into a ray of light and flew away. "What is this?" Xiang Nan was shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a large-scale operation by the Haran Palace elders since he arrived at the Haran sect. Thinking of this, he hurriedly ran towards the gate of the sect. The disciples below had long since witnessed the actions of the elders, and large numbers of Haran sect disciples had almost poured out of their nests. As Xiang Nan ran along with the disciples, he had a bad premonition. Almost all of the Grand Hall elders had come out, and the 5 peak masters, including half of the Gourd, had also arrived. Just what kind of major event had happened that could alert the entire Grand Hall? At the entrance of the sect, there were already a sea of people. Everyone raised their heads high, their faces filled with inexplicable fear and shock. Right above the main entrance of the nature sect, there were 2 groups of peak-level experts floating in the air, faintly confronting each other. On his side were naturally the elders of the Haran sect, while the peak experts on the other side were all wearing white clothes and pointed white hats. Heavenly Devil Religion! All the disciples exclaimed in unison. Xiang Nan's eyes turned cold. Why did the Heavenly Devil cult invade in such a large scale? Could it be that they were already so crazy that they wanted to charge into the territory of the nature sect? Demon crowd! In the direction of the Haran sect, an old man stepped out of the sky. This human bone immortal wind, white beard and white eyebrows, was surprisingly the old man who was present when Xiang Nan and the others divided their factions. At this moment, he realized that this old man was actually a 3rd-generation elder of the Haran sect. Peak Master Zhang Haiyuan of the Qi sect, Peak Master Wu Qingfeng of the Sword sect, Peak Master Chu Xiao of the Saber sect, Peak Master Su Kaiyu of the Heavenly sect, and Peak Master Half-Gourd of Zhaohua Peak were all standing at the forefront. The 5 Peak Masters Yuan Qi soared into the sky, causing the entire Haran mountain range to tremble. Something really happened this time. A disciple panicked and his entire face turned snow white. As for that Dao Bone Immortal Wind's 3rd-generation elder, he was accompanied by a dozen or so other 3rd-generation elders. It could be said that all of his strengths had ascended to the heavens. He was a ruthless character who could shake the Hautian Empire 3 times with a wave of his arm. Demon crowd! The 3rd-generation elder of the Bone Immortal Wind pointed in the direction of the Heavenly Devil Religion. How Tian City, don't you want to fight to the death with our Haran sect? In the direction of the Heavenly Devil Religion, a graceful woman stepped out of thin air. Behind this woman were 9 black demonic dragons, and demonic energy soared into the sky. Kiki Kiki. The woman laughed wildly. Today, my sacred sect is not here to fight against the nature sect, but for one of my disciples' wishes. Little Dai, come out. Behind the woman, a graceful girl who had combed her black hair into a big bow walked out. Upon seeing this person, Xiang Nan's heart sank. Wasn't this the Heavenly Demon cult's demonic woman, Dream Butterfly? Did she come here? However, seeing that Dream Butterfly standing in midair, she bowed to the nature sect and said, "Seniors of the nature sect, don't be angry. The reason why our sacred sect is so prominent is because this Hautian city is truly difficult to enter. However, my master said that we are not here to fight against your sect, but to find someone." In the direction of the Haran sect, most of the elders' eyes fell on half a gourd. Everyone knew that the Heavenly Demon sect was going to hold some sort of alchemist conference recently. Most likely, they were here for half a gourd. However, half of the gourd lazily waved its hand, "They're not here for me." At this moment, Dream Butterfly waved her right hand, and many Heavenly Devil cult disciples threw red petals rain all over the sky. "This time, I'm here to look for your sect's disciple, Xiang Nan," said Dream Butterfly. "I want to find Xiang Nan and propose marriage." As soon as these words were spoken, countless people fell silent in the vast scene. Xiang Nan's pupils contracted. The last time he broke up with Meng Dai, she had said that she wanted to propose marriage. At that time, Xiang Nan only thought that she was talking madly. He didn't expect that this crazy demonic woman was serious and actually came. Chapter 202 Air Confrontation. Xiang Nan propose marriage. The entire Haran sect's disciples immediately became restless. Even the elders of the Haran sect hadn't expected this. Demonis, don't try to deceive the crowd with monstrous words. The 3 generations of elders frowned and said, "Are you so bold as to openly bewitch our Haran sect disciples?" Dream Butterfly didn't have the time to pay attention to the 3rd generation elders. Her pair of pitch-black eyes were only searching the crowd of disciples below. However, there were so many disciples that she couldn't find Xiang Nan's shadow. However, the disciples of the Haran sect were all so excited that they were on the verge of going crazy. Damn, the heavenly demon sect's people came to the Haran sect to propose marriage. This was the strangest thing that had happened since the Hautian Empire was founded. Who is Xiang Nan? Many high-grade academy disciples whispered to each other. They had never heard of Xiang Nan's name, but today, the word Xiang Nan would probably be imprinted in their hearts for a lifetime. Who is Xiang Nan? In the sky, behind the Haran sect camp, elders were also puzzled. However, the 4 peak masters simultaneously focused their gazes on Su Kaiyu. "Xiang Nan, come up." Su Kaiyu scolded coldly. She waved her right hand and used a strand of Yuan Qi to accurately wrap around Xiang Nan, bringing Xiang Nan into the sky. Yes, it's him. Meng Dai happily clapped her hands and said, "Master, I'm talking about him." The powerful woman of the heavenly devil religion sized up Xiang Nan with a pair of seductive eyes and said, "Take him away. Let's see who dares to make a move." Su Kaiyu immediately released a shocking amount of Yuan Qi. The other 4 peak masters also took a step forward and were about to start a vast decisive battle. "Meng Dai, what the hell are you doing?" Xiang Nan furrowed his brows and shouted sternly. At this moment, the gazes of all the disciples were all focused on Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly, the 2 initiators. This is ridiculous. The 2 young people were in love with each other, yet they actually managed to create such a big formation. The key was that these 2 people were from 2 different camps, one was righteous and the other was evil. Heavens, the heavenly demon cult's demonic woman fell in love with the Haran sect disciples. "It's really so wonderful," a disciple whispered. The disciples were all young people. Although they knew that good and evil were inseparable, the focus of the young people's attention was not on the opposition between good and evil, but on the love that the young people were all passionate about. Just as it was said that watching the fun wasn't a big deal, when a disciple spoke, a large number of disciples began to discuss it one after another. This scene caused the Haran sect elders to feel their faces turn dark. With a loud shout, all the disciples were shocked to silence. As for the confrontation in the sky, it really couldn't go on. Whether it was the Haran sect or the heavenly demon sect, neither of them wanted to start a war here. Let's not talk about who wins or loses, but the winner will definitely win miserably in the end. If we say that the heavy damage to Yuan Qi is light, then it might cause us to be unable to recover from it. All the elders looked at Su Kaiyu, hoping that Xiang Nan's master would speak, while Su Kaiyu looked at Xiang Nan and said, "What's going on?" Xiang Nan frowned and said, "When I was out on a mission, I had a conflict with that demonic woman. Unexpectedly, she made such a farce." Hearing this, the elders sighed in their hearts. A cult was a cult. As soon as they thought about it, there was nothing in this world that they did not dare to do. Xiang Nan, are you willing to marry me? My master has already said that if you are willing to marry me, then my holy sect will not touch a hair of the nature sect for the next 50 years. Meng Dai smiled as she stared at Xiang Nan and said, Xiang Nan, are you willing to marry me? Impudent! Su Kaiyu was enraged and shouted, what a big tone! How could our Haran sect betray our sect disciples at the expense of enduring such humiliation and stealing lives? You don't have to think about it. If you want to start a war, just do it now. Everyone was shocked. Su Caiyue's personality was truly life-threatening. However, the elders nodded repeatedly at Su Caiyue's words. Ha 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 ha. The 9 Dragons' demonic woman looked up and laughed. The love between disciples is not something that you can bring up morality. Decent people really like to put on a righteous appearance. My disciple has taken a fancy to your sect's disciples. What does it have to do with you old fellows? Ha ha. Half a gourd dug its ears and said, what does that have to do with you, this demonic woman? Didn't you also come? The 9 dragons which waved her hand, I'm not here to fight, but to give a betrothal gift. If Xiang Nan is willing to marry my disciple, these 20 boxes of Tier 5 spirit herbs, 10 boxes of Earth-grade elementary-grade weapons, 3 boxes of Tier 5 spirit pills, and 1 box of Tier 6 spirit pills will all be given to the Haran sect, the 9 dragons which said. The disciples were extremely shocked. It was the first time they heard that a 6th grade spirit pill was sent from a box. But, what is this? Xiang Nan, say something. Meng Dai said, give me a word. Do you want to marry me or not? Xiang Nan was dumbfounded. It took him a long time to regain his senses and said, are you out of your mind? 10,000 steps back, even if we are not in an opposing relationship, it is impossible for me to marry you. I've only known you for a few days, and I know who you are, so I'm going to marry you. The dream butterfly did not care, why not? Like is like, don't like is not like, no 10 years can marry, no a day can marry, you can deceive your own heart. Let me ask you, are you going to marry or not? Don't marry. Xiang Nan replied resolutely. The elders of the Haran sect in the rear were already furious. Fortunately, Xiang Nan's reply was not humble or arrogant. Otherwise, an elder would have secretly circulated his yuan qi. Once Xiang Nan said anything that humiliated the sect, he would kill Xiang Nan on the spot with a single palm. Yes. Meng Dai nodded and said, what if we are not righteous and evil opponents? If I am also a disciple of the Haran sect, do you want to marry me or not? As soon as these words were spoken, the entire Haran sect cried out in alarm. Could it be that the demonic woman was planning to change her ways and walk the righteous path from now on? Jiang Yunfan sighed and subconsciously looked at Mu Sueki. Damn, the power of love is really great. In the end, Xiang Nan still shook his head. Why? Meng Dai asked, I gave you so many betrothal gifts and treated you so well. Why don't you marry me? Xiang Nan said, not to mention that you are a heavenly devil cult demonic woman, I am a disciple of the Haran sect. Even if you and I are just ordinary people, I will not marry you. Then why? Meng Dieki said. Xiang Nan's expression darkened as he said, because I don't believe in love. Only Xiang Nan, who had experienced the betrayal of his beloved woman, could say such a sad and touching sentence. No one doubted the authenticity of Xiang Nan's words, because the feelings contained in those words were so true and sad. Hearing this answer, Meng Dai didn't know what to say. Originally, their heavenly devil religion had come over to beg for marriage with great fanfare. This was a rare act in the world, but now, it was rejected by Xiang Nan on the spot. anyone would be angry and embarrassed. Perhaps love would give birth to hatred. However, Dream Butterfly grew up in the heavenly devil religion. She was indifferent to the morals of ordinary people. Not only did she not feel humiliated, even her master nodded her head repeatedly. He is a random kid. He is not as hypocritical as those righteous people. Good disciple, they've rejected you. What do you plan to do? Do you want me to help you snatch Xiang Nan over? Hearing these words, all the elders of the Haran sect fell into a state of alert, ready to fight at any time. Meng Dai lowered her head for a while, then suddenly raised her head and smiled. What's the point of robbing people? I want to rob their hearts. Master, let's go back. This matter is not over yet. One day, I want that Xiang Nan to come to my holy sect with a betrothal gift and beg me to marry him. The 9 Dragons demonic woman raised her head to the sky and laughed. Her dissolute laughter soared into the 9 heavens. With a wave of her hand, countless heavenly devil cult members turned into a black light that shot into the sky and instantly disappeared. A farce started abruptly and ended unexpectedly. Caillou, bring your disciple to Haran Palace, said a 3rd-generation elder from the direction of the Haran sect. After saying that, many of the elders left with their sleeves crossed. Su Caillou wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she looked at Xiang Nan and said, "Truth be told, are you related to that demonic woman? Have you thought about it clearly? In a while, you will be questioned by elders in Haran Hall." "No." Xiang Nan replied resolutely. Su Caillou nodded. "If you say you don't have it, then you don't have it. I trust you." After saying that, Su Caillou used her Yuan Qi to lift Xiang Nan and flew towards the direction of the Haran Palace. The disciples below still felt that their intentions were still endless, and this massive request for marriage ended just like that. However, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they did not fight, otherwise, the scene would have been unimaginable. However, the 2 words Xiang Nan could be considered famous. Chapter 203 Haran Hall. Haran sect was a very large force. It had its own business field in the secular world, and also had its own strong interpersonal relationships in the military and government. Many Haran sect disciples would choose to leave the sect and they were strong. Some would set up their own sect and become the overlord of one side, while others would enter the military and become the generals of the other side. Although these people were no longer nominally from the Haran sect, they usually had close relations with the Haran sect and had frequent dealings with them. This was the reason why some military missions that were not convenient for them to interfere could be sent directly to the Haran sect. In the 1,500 years since the founding of the Haran sect, it had been like a huge tree. The site of Haotian city was only an appearance of it being exposed outside the surface of the earth, but in reality, there were veins that stretched out in all directions beneath the soil. However, the strength of the Haran sect was enormous, but it was not bloated because it knew how to delegate power. To maintain such a large sect force, it was impossible to do so with just one word. Therefore, sect leader Haran wisely gave up his rights and gave it to the Haoran Palace. It could be said that every major decision of the Haoran sect was not made by the sect leader, but by the elders of the Haoran Palace. That was why the heavenly Tao old man of the Haran sect did not usually stay in the sect. Only when the sect encountered serious problems, or even threatened the life and death of the sect, would the sect master directly seize power and use decisive and tough methods to cut the mess and save the sect and the fire. In order to prevent this large sect from heading towards the abyss of eternal calamity because of the paranoia of some minority sects, the nature sect had to have more than 2/3 of the elders raise their hands to pass every major resolution. Otherwise, it would be null and void. The last time Xiang Nan came to Harren Hall, he was divided into factions. At that time, he was only standing in the outermost building of Harren Hall. And this time, he was truly entering Harren Hall. Harren Hall was where the Board of Elders ruled on a decision. Normally, there were 5 third-generation elders, 13 fourth-generation elders, and 26 fifth-generation elders residing in the Board of Elders. There were a total of 44 of them. Of course, this did not mean that there were only 5 third-generation elders in the Nature's Nature sect, but that only these 5 people usually served on the Board of Elders. But today, many 3rd, 4th, and 5th generations of elders who weren't part of the elders group had also come. Xiang Nan stood alone in the stand-in trial, and opposite him was a row of high seats. Those from the Board of Elders sat on the elders' seats that were 10 meters tall, and they could look down at Xiang Nan from above. At this moment, elders were whispering to each other, whispering something. Shi Beihong was a peak half-saint third-layer expert. At the same time, he was also the 3rd-generation elder. He was also the head of the Board of Elders. This person was mainly responsible for managing the daily affairs of the sect. Whether it was meeting with other sects or officials, or traveling to other continents, he was the supreme leader. Back then, when Xiang Nan divided the factions, the old man who was responsible for promoting the sect's tenet, the Dao Bone Immortal Wind, was him. Xiang Nan. At this moment, Shi Beihong lightly descended from the seat of elders and walked to Xiang Nan step by step. Xiang Nan greets Elder Shi. Xiang Nan bowed respectfully. Shi Beihong nodded his head and said, "What I'm going to ask you next is of great importance. You must think of a good answer and be realistic." Xiang Nan will obey elders' orders. Xiang Nan said. Shi Beihong said, "Do you have anything to do with the Heavenly Devil religion? You need to know that the impact of this matter is very bad. Very soon, someone from Haojing will come to our sect to investigate this matter." This was not a joke. The Harren sect was the #1 sect in the Blue Tide continent. If even this sect came together with the Heavenly Devil sect, it was obvious how bad the result would be. "I've nothing to do with it," Xiang Nan replied confidently. "No connection." An elder stood up and shouted, "There is no connection. The Heavenly Devil Church has come to Haotian City with so many betrothal gifts. What explanation do you have for that?" At this time, Shi Beihong gave Xiang Nan a relieved look and said gently, "Just tell the truth. Don't be afraid. As long as you don't lie, the Nature sect will stand behind you and support you, even if there is great trouble." Xiang Nan nodded gratefully to Elder Shi Beihong and said, "Indeed, we have nothing to do with each other. As far as I am concerned, their visit this time is nothing more than an affair between a man and a woman. As for whether they have any other motives, Xiang Nan is not sure." Shi Beihong said, "Just how did your relationship with the Heavenly Devil sect which come about? Speak slowly, word by word." Xiang Nan did not dare to conceal anything, so he truthfully reported how he had accepted the mission, how he mistakenly thought that the demonic woman was a child, and how he had saved her, as well as how she had brought him back to the Harren sect. The members of the Board of Elders have already heard what happened. Shi Beihong nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he turned to the elder's seat and said, "I wonder what everyone has to say." A member of the Board of Elders stood up and said, "I suggest that Xiang Nan be expelled from the sect. From now on, he will no longer be a disciple of our Harren sect." "Why?" Shi Beihong asked with a smile. The elder said, "Even if what Xiang Nan said is true, he has brought about an extremely bad influence on the sect this time. This will damage the reputation of our Harren sect. Shi Beihong smiled and said, "Our Haran sect has never been afraid of losing its reputation. If we have to give up a sect disciple every time something like this happens, then our Haran sect will not be able to survive for 1,500 years." Another elder stood up and said, "I also agree to expel Xiang Nan. He can endure the demonic woman's bewitchment today, so it's hard to guarantee that he won't turn around and join the cult tomorrow." Shi Beihong smiled and said, "Neither you nor I have the right to judge what will happen in the future. We cannot destroy the future of a disciple just because of a single idea." Another elder stepped forward and said, "But we don't know if Xiang Nan is hiding anything. Perhaps the truth is not as simple as he said." At this time, Sun Peak Master Su Kaiyu, who did not belong to the elders group, stepped forward and said, "What Xiang Nan said is true. I am willing to guarantee him with my personality." The elder sighed, "Kaiyu, you are too protective of the calf." Su Kaiyu said neither humbly nor arrogantly, "If I didn't believe in Xiang Nan, I wouldn't have taken him as a disciple. Since I'm his master, I naturally have to speak up for him. We can't convict Xiang Nan based on mere speculation. If that's the case, wouldn't our Haran sect collapse if the demon sect suddenly showed goodwill to all the elders one day?" "You." The elder glared at Su Kaiyu angrily. He pointed at Su Kaiyu and said, "Haran Hall, how can you be so disrespectful? Sayu's every word is true. How can you not be respectful?" Su Kaiyu fiercely asked, "Could it be that my Haran Hall can no longer tolerate a single word of truth?" Chapter 204 Nameless Peak. Su Tsayu's temper was famous throughout the entire Haran sect. It was as if there was nothing in this world that she did not dare to do, and there was nothing that she did not dare to say. Although the Peak Master was not a member of the Board of Elders, his words still carried tremendous weight in the Haran sect. "I don't think this matter is that complicated." Sword Sect, Peak Master Xiang Yang Wu Qingfeng stood up and said, "The Heavenly Demon Sect is acting in a mysterious manner. It doesn't play cards according to common sense. What the elders suspect and worry about is that this Southern Heavenly Devil Sect is a chess piece sent by the Heavenly Devil Sect into our Haran sect." Although he didn't say anything, this was indeed what the elders were most worried about. And Wu Qingfeng said, "I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just seeking truth from facts. If I put a chess piece into the Heavenly Devil religion, I don't think I would rush into the Heavenly Devil religion and expose the identity of this chess piece." As soon as these words were spoken, Elder Shi immediately fell silent. Yes, if Xiang Nan was a spy from the Heavenly Devil sect, why would they come here to cause such a scene? Afraid that the Haran sect wouldn't suspect Xiang Nan? Wasn't this an inconsistency? It's not like we haven't thought of this. An elder nodded, otherwise, Xiang Nan would not be able to remain free. However, this matter is of great importance. There is no room for any mistakes. How about this? Shi Beihong stood up and said, "Detain Xiang Nan for 10 days first. We will send people to the northern border to inspect him. If what Xiang Nan said is true, we will give him a clean slate. How about it?" The elders pondered for a while, but no one raised any objections. "All right then. Raise your hand and vote." Elder Shi Beihong was the first to raise his right hand. Immediately after, more than 2/3 of the elders of the Board of Elders also raised their hands. They chose to temporarily trust Xiang Nan. "Then, let's temporarily lock Xiang Nan up at Nameless Peak." Shi Beihong laughed. The elders were all surprised for a moment, but after some thought, no one objected. Afterwards, Xiang Nan realized that Nameless Peak was a very impressive place. The Haran sect had its own dungeons, which usually held disciples who violated the rules of the sect. Those with lighter crimes were released after a few months of imprisonment, while those with heavier crimes were also released after a few years of imprisonment. As for the nameless peak, it was the place where the old man of the heavenly Tao had occasionally made mistakes when he was young and was punished to face the wall. The elders were worried that if Xiang Nan was really a chess piece planted by the heavenly devil cult, it would be inappropriate to put him in the dungeon, and he might collude with others. Therefore, he placed Xiang Nan in the nameless peak, a place that ordinary disciples would never be able to enter in their lifetime. This nameless peak was located at the rear of Haran Peak. It looked like it had been split in half by a single blade. The left half was as complete as before, and the right half was as smooth as a mirror. It was a straight cliff. At the center of the cliff, there was a very large cave. It was the place where the heavenly Tao old man had faced when he was young. The reason why this place wasn't simple was because of its extraordinary significance. To put it simply, there wasn't any secret treasure hidden inside. It was just a simple cave. That was all. Su Kaiyu personally sent Xiang Nan into the entrance of the nameless peak mountain cave and said, "Don't worry, with Master here, they can't treat you unfairly. 10 days from now, I'll come pick you up." After saying that, Su Kaiyu turned around and left. However, Xiang Nan could tell that although her master's expression was still expressionless, her tone was very unpleasant. He didn't know if she was displeased with his relationship with the heavenly demon sex demonic woman or that the elders were too stubborn. Perhaps the latter was more likely. Xiang Nan walked around the cave boredom. The furnishings here were very simple. There was only a small stone bed and nothing else. The area of the cave was quite large. Because the entire mountain was only one cave, and it was still halfway up the mountain, the top of the cave was 50 meters tall and the depth could reach around 100 meters. It was like a rectangle. Originally, according to Xiang Nan's plan, he would rent a pill furnace in Zhaohua Peak and find a deserted place to secretly increase his resistance to electricity and absorb the white flames and lightning. It seemed impossible now. The grade of his pill furnace was too low, and it was no longer enough to withstand the temperatures of refining the body. As for the next 10 days, Xiang Nan hadn't had such a long period of leisure since he was reborn. At the beginning, he was quite happy and was finally able to take a good rest. However, in less than a day, he started to feel panicked. If he didn't do anything, he would always feel uncomfortable all over his body. Thus, he began to cultivate the sun god technique on his own. He drew light and let a gentle beam of sunlight shine down, bathing his entire body. In this kind of slow cultivation, he was going to raise the realm of the sun divine technique. At this moment, Xiang Nan was in the sun god skill, the first level of the earth yang skill. It was only at the beginner stage, but he had already trained the first level to perfection. Thinking about it, if one wanted to cultivate the second level of the earth yang realm, they would probably have to reach the second level of the origin return realm or even higher to cultivate. Next, he didn't know what to do, just lying on the stone bed, leaning against the top of the cave, staring blankly. What is that? Suddenly, he discovered that there seemed to be some blurry indentation on the top of the cave, and he used his essence feather wings to fly up. After the dust was blown away, it turned out to be traces of sabers and swords that had been chopped down. Those traces were still very clear, as if the old man of the heavenly Tao still remembered the days when he was here. At that time, the sect leader was punished here. He should be very young, probably around my age. He must be very bored here. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately flew down and used his enormous Yuan Qi feathered wings to face the entrance of the cave. He heavily flapped it a few times, causing dust to fly up in the cave. Over the years, the dust accumulated on the inner wall of the cave was blown away. As a result, a large number of dense saber and sword cuts, as well as many simple pictures and characters, appeared. Xiang Nan was shocked. He discovered that the simple diagrams were all carved into small figures. Some of them were holding swords, some were holding knives, some were attacking, and some were defending. My God, Xiang Nan's mind buzzed. The scene this place saw was very similar to the first cave that Martial King Heavenly Thunder had dug. These are all essays carved by the sect master when he was cultivating martial arts and martial skills. Xiang Nan was shocked. Sect master, Old Man Tian Dao. That was the number 2 expert of the Blue Tide continent. To be able to see the inspirational essays of such peak martial artists, every stroke was extremely precious. Xiang Nan was so excited that he immediately began to distinguish the marks on the wall. However, he soon discovered that things weren't as optimistic as he had imagined. The reason for that was because back then, the Heavenly Tao Old Man was still young, and he was a young man. More than half of these marks were boring and meaningless. There were also some nicks that were indeed related to cultivation techniques and martial skills, but none of them were coherent. It could even be said that they were just a few words. Chapter 205 Broken Inspiration. Most importantly, these nicks only came from an instant of inspiration. Not only is inspiration not continuous, but many of them are abandoned. It was as if a person was about to write an article. Normally, when he was living, an inspiration suddenly came to his mind and he hurriedly took out a pen and paper to write it down. It is possible that this inspiration will be used in the future, but more often than not, this inspiration will be overturned to polish up new directions. No one would seriously carve an entire chant on the wall, just like the Heavenly Tao Old Man. Xiang Nan felt a headache when he saw the messy and illogical inspiration fragments. How are we going to sort this out? Xiang Nan rubbed his temples. After a long time, he was still unwilling to give up, so he found some dust. He dusted and buried the nicks he had made for the sake of carving them, and continued combing the rest. Half a day had passed, and the entire cave had been completely filled with useless scars by Xiang Nan. The remaining scars were still messy. Xiang Nan comprehended those inspirations based on his strong comprehension of martial arts. He discovered that the old man of the Heavenly Tao back then was actually bored. He had carved more than 30 inspirational essays on martial skills here. What an unparalleled genius! Xiang Nan sighed sincerely. Although he was strong in his previous life, he was strong in his martial Tao physique, while the old man of the Heavenly Tao was strong in his innate terrifying comprehension of martial Tao. Unfortunately, most of these 30 kinds of martial skills were randomly created by the Heavenly Tao Old Man with fun in mind. They weren't finished at all. Some of them were thrown away at the beginning, while others didn't have a head or tail. Xiang Nan continued to fill the ground and worked for an entire night before leaving behind the last martial skill. This was a very strange martial skill. It was very different from the common martial skills. It did not have any specific martial skill moves, but was more like a long-term fantasy about martial skills. The most troublesome thing was that this strange martial skill didn't even have an incantation, only a few words. Xiang Nan simply sat down cross-legged, his eyes staring straight at the incomplete words and the simple patterns of the characters. Such an incomplete nick was like a skeleton. Xiang Nan had to use his understanding of martial arts theory to fill the skeleton with flesh and blood before he could use it. It was as if the Heavenly Tao Old Man had written an idea of a martial skill in his essay back then. Now that Xiang Nan wanted to perfect this idea, it was equivalent to two people from different eras surpassing the limits of the times and creating a martial skill together. Whether he could succeed or not, this kind of experience was incomparably precious to Xiang Nan. Based on his own knowledge, Xiang Nan began to ponder and perfect Zhang Haoren's thoughts. In fact, he had even modified some of his ideas in some inappropriate areas. However, the more this happened, the more shocked Xiang Nan's heart became. That young Zhang Haoren's thoughts were truly unimaginable. By the time this set of martial skills was almost done by Xiang Nan, 3 days had already passed. However, it was only at the last moment that he realized that this strange martial skill was simply impossible to cultivate. This seems to be a strange avatar technique. Xiang Nan frowned and muttered to himself, but according to the sect master's inspiration, this avatar still lacks something. It was like a person sketching a palace in the air in his mind. Of course, the idea was very good, but how could he let the palace float in the air? No specific solution was given. Perhaps at that time, it was time for the heavenly Tao old man to be punished to face the wall and think about it. He might have been released, or he might have succeeded in practicing, so he did not continue to write on the wall. What else is missing? Xiang Nan was puzzled. Avatars were common, but most of them could only be used by high-level martial artists. For example, Divine Martial Realm or even Half-Saint Realm martial artists. They would usually cultivate one or more avatars, but that wasn't a martial skill. The Heavenly Tao Old Man, on the other hand, used a martial skill to split up an external avatar for a short period of time. This external avatar quickly disappeared, and it was not a true avatar. This external avatar could not be achieved by circulating Yuan Qi, but required another method to activate it. As Xiang Nan thought about it, he suddenly slapped his forehead and said in surprise, "Seal. That's right, I can activate my avatar by forming a seal. Isn't the Thunder King seal just such a method?" Thinking of this, Xiang Nan's heart pounded wildly. He had a bold idea. He wanted to create the 7th seal of the Thunder King seal. Just do it. Xiang Nan immediately recalled everything about the Thunder King seal in his mind, and combined it with theoretical starting point of the Heavenly Tao Old Man's strange avatar technique. One was the arrogant Heavenly Thunder Martial King, and the other was the arrogant Heavenly Tao Old Man. Xiang Nan had gathered 2 types of inspiration for the 2 of them. He took out a pen and paper, wrote and drew on the paper, continuously overturned the incantation he had created, and constantly thought of new ways. Time passed bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, Xiang Nan was imprisoned here. It was already the 6th day. On this day, Xiang Nan finally let out a long sigh of relief. Looking at the dense writing on the paper and the pile of paper lying on the ground, his heart was a little uncertain. I wonder if this set of incantations written by me will be able to take shape. This martial skill was created by the 3 of them, but the most difficult part was still Xiang Nan. The reason for that was because the 2 of them were only irresponsibly proposing inspiration, and Xiang Nan was trying to realize their inspiration. Thus, Xiang Nan stood up. His hands began to pinch out strange shapes, and he began to clash, collude, entangle, struggle, pull, and make even more strange movements. As a result, he felt a strange power slowly taking shape in his body. It really works. Xiang Nan was delighted, but because of this distraction, he failed again. Again. He did not tire of it, trying again and again, forming seals for 2 days and 2 nights in a row, constantly improving and perfecting. It was the 8th day of his imprisonment. When Xiang Nan's hands formed a complete set of hand seals, he felt a shadow flash in the corner of his eyes. Another slowly swaying Xiang Nan came out from Xiang Nan's main body with a whoosh. This Xiangnan avatar was almost identical to Xiangnan, but it was a little drifting, like a person in a painting, not as real as a living person. Xiangnan looked at his avatar and sucked in a breath of cold air. He could actually sense the world through his avatar's eyes, ears, and even his entire body. However, in such a shocked manner, the avatar quickly disappeared. I really succeeded. Xiangnan excitedly patted his thigh, again. Using martial skills to create an avatar had already succeeded, but to maintain the avatar, one needed to focus on two things. This dual-purpose skill was not something that could be cultivated with just hard work. What was needed was sufficient talent. Chapter 206 Avatar Imprint. Xiangnan named the new martial skill Thunder King, Clone Seal. According to the assumption given by the Heavenly Tao Old Man, the avatar seal could split up into at most 7 external avatars. Of course, each additional avatar would be more difficult and would require more Yuan Qi support. At present, Xiangnan's Yuan Qi content could only be divided into one avatar. At this moment, it was Xiangnan's 100th attempt to split up his avatar. An avatar could only last for about 10 seconds at most. Through constant cultivation, Xiangnan managed to last for the most complete 10 seconds. Thus, Xiangnan stared at the entrance of the cave in front of him. He quickly formed a seal with both of his hands and shouted, "Thunder King, Avatar Seal." Swoosh, an avatar of Xiangnan moved out from the main body horizontally. "Azure Dragon, go out to sea!" Xiangnan shouted. He saw the clone rushing forward with a loud boom, holding a huge saber in its hand. Indeed, avatars can use martial skills. Xiangnan laughed heartily. However, there was one more point. The Yuan Qi consumed by the Azure Dragon avatar was directly extracted from Xiangnan's true body. Xiangnan excitedly controlled his avatar to do all sorts of movements. The price to match was the rapid loss of Yuan Qi in his body. A ruthless one. Xiangnan loosened his grip and dissipated the clone that had lasted for 7 seconds. Then, he continued to form seals and formed a new clone. Immediately after, he and his avatar simultaneously slashed out a blade light towards the sky outside. 2 rays of saber light soared into the sky and floated outside the mountain wall. Again. Xiangnan chopped again, keeping in sync with his avatar. At the expense of consuming twice his Yuan Qi, he chopped out 2 saber lights at the same time. When Xiangnan struck out with the 5th blade, his avatar also struck out with the 5th blade. 10 blade lights condensed into a gigantic blade light that was 20 meters long in the sky. Jing Long Yao Ri, ha! Xiangnan was panting heavily as he leaned against the mountain wall, his eyes filled with incomparable excitement. With an avatar, one of the most troublesome problems for Jing Long Yao Ri had been solved. Xiangnan could use this move even faster. No, there should be more powerful uses. Xiangnan suddenly thought of an inspiration, which made his heart skip a beat. Ah, Sun God Technique. If I use my avatar to use Sun God Technique, then it will not be me who will suffer backlash, but my avatar. Ha! Apart from being excited, Xiangnan didn't care how tired his body was and immediately condensed a new avatar. Under Xiangnan's control, the avatar suddenly raised its right hand and a fierce beam of sunlight fell from the sky, smashing directly onto the avatar's body. Seeing this scene, Xiangnan opened his mouth wide in surprise. His avatar could also use the Sun God Technique. "Let's go!" Xiangnan shouted loudly. The avatar was shrouded in intense sunlight and began to hack and jump. It even used the power of the sun to send the strongest azure dragon out to sea. Ah, something's wrong. But then, Xiang Nan realized that the situation was not simple. Although his avatar was using the power of the sun, he gradually felt the pain of being devoured by the backlash. However, the pain was very slight, much lighter than usual. Could it be that my avatar will suffer the same damage? But only half of it? Xiang Nan frowned and thought, and decided that it was probably like this. There was a constant connection between the avatar and the true body. The yuan qi used by the avatar consumed the yuan qi within the true body. If the avatar was injured, half of the damage would be returned to Xiang Nan's true body. But this was already heaven-defying. If Xiang Nan had grasped the avatar imprint when he was in the Qing Shui forest, the lethal backlash he had suffered that time would not have been fatal. He only needed to slowly circulate his cultivation to dissolve it. Heh! What if I use the sun god technique together? Xiang Nan dispersed his avatar and condensed a new avatar. His arms began to tremble with excitement and he immediately raised his left hand. Rumble! 2 beams of sunlight fell, enveloping their true bodies and avatars. Charge! The 2 Xiang Nan simultaneously used the azure dragon to go out to sea, while the 2 flame Xiang Nan charged out at the same time. This move had consumed twice as much yuan qi as Xiang Nan's. Xiang Nan suddenly had a fantasy. At the final moment of the charge, he and his avatar suddenly fused in the same direction. The 2 Xiang Nan and the 2 azure dragons went out to sea and merged. When the last move of the drawing blade slash was released, a 20-meter daylight saber light soared into the sky. So strong! Xiang Nan's eyes widened as he sat down excitedly. Without the need for dragon-shocking sunshine, he would be able to release a 10-meter-long drawing blade slash. What kind of concept was this? One had to know that the blade radiance of the drawing saber slash was even more formidable than the dragon-shocking sunshine. I'm rich. I'm really rich this time. Xiang Nan laughed heartily. When the 2 azure dragons went out to sea together, their power wasn't just doubled, it was nearly quadrupled. Whoosh, whoosh, what? However, this yuan qi consumption is too frightening. Xiang Nan gasped for breath fiercely. Apart from being excited, he also realized the flaws of the avatar imprint. However, how could there be a perfect good thing in this world? Even though he had consumed more yuan qi, he had managed to obtain an even more powerful explosion in an instant. No, I have to recover. I can't even lift my fingers. He slowly climbed onto the stone bed and lay on it to calm his excitement. He didn't eat or sleep for 8 consecutive days and 9 nights, coupled with his highly intense brain power and exhaustion of yuan qi, he had already fallen into a state of extreme exhaustion. He had just laid down and fell asleep. He fell asleep until he fell into a daze. After sleeping for an unknown amount of time, Xiang Nan was suddenly awakened. He opened his eyes and saw that the person in front of him was Su Kaiyu. Master? Can I go out now? Xiang Nan sat up in surprise. Su Kaiyu nodded, your heart is quite big, and you can still sleep. The people we sent out have already found out. With Luo Fei of the Northern Border Defense City vouching for you, you are free. Xiang Nan excitedly told Su Kaiyu about this method of incarnation. Su Kaiyu smiled and said, very good. This way, you can reduce the probability of backlash of the sun god skill. However, if you can't train as a master, you just have to work harder yourself. That's right. The Lightning King seal was created based on the heavenly grade Lightning Meridian's attribute. Not to mention Su Kaiyu, even if she did have the lightning meridian's attribute, as long as her lightning strike talent wasn't as high as the heavenly grade, it wouldn't work. Su Kaiyu left Nameless Peak with Xiang Nan. Halfway through, she said, there are only 5 days left before the examination. Prepare yourself. Disciple understands. Xiang Nan nodded. He had Su Kaiyu put him on Fortune Peak, so he immediately ran to the pill room area to rent a pill furnace. Loaning pill furnaces also required credits, 1 point per day. At this time, Xiang Nan had 250 points. He didn't care about this little expense and directly rented it for 3 days. However, all the disciples they saw along the way were far away, pointing at Xiang Nan. Look, that's Xiang Nan. He's the one who got the heavenly devil cult's demonic woman. What a ruthless person. Even the heavenly devil cult's demonic woman dares to seduce him. He is indeed a real man. Chapter 207 Advancement. Ha, then isn't he our Haran Peak's heaven-ranked little white face? After renting the pill furnace, Xiang Nan hurriedly left. Originally, he didn't intend to pay attention to the gossip, but after hearing this, he couldn't help it. Who do you think is a pretty boy? Xiang Nan frowned and looked at the Zhaohua Peak disciple. The disciple hurriedly said, nothing, nothing. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and turned to leave. However, after leaving Zhaohua Peak, the situation did not improve in the slightest. Almost every sect martial brother he met would pretend not to pay attention to Xiang Nan, but in fact, they had been secretly watching. Right at this moment, a handsome figure suddenly descended and hugged Xiang Nan's shoulder. Alright, Xiang Nan, quickly tell senior brother, how did you get the heavenly demon cult's demonic woman? How formidable! Senior brother Yunfan, why are you mocking me? Xiang Nan smiled bitterly. Jiang Yunfan laughed and patted Xiang Nan on the shoulder. What's wrong? It's only natural for men to love women. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Besides, you didn't accept the betrothal gift from that demonic woman. Xiang Nan shook his head. Didn't you notice that the way those junior brothers looked at me was different? Don't worry about them. Jiang Yunfan said carelessly, they are just jealous. You can even deal with the heavenly demon cult's demonic woman. How prestigious is that? The male disciples are all envious of you. The female disciples are full of curiosity about you. This is a good thing. In any case, you won't lose a piece of meat. You're famous again. Xiang Nan was really famous this time. On the one hand, it was because of the demonic woman, and on the other hand, it was because of the title of number 1 on the Eagle rankings. The Hawk rankings had never lacked a first-place team, but there was only one member in a team. This was unprecedented. It had never happened in the entire history of the Haran sect. Xiang Nan, stop messing around. I'm serious. Yunfan Chang whispered in Xiang Nan's ear, how to catch a woman's heart. Teach your teacher brother. What? Xiang Nan chuckled, are you going to use it against senior sister Musweki? Cough, this is what I said. Jiang Yunfan's face turned red and he said, this, you can't say that. Then what? I have to leave first. Looking at Jiang Yunfan's departing figure, Xiang Nan couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Even a forthright man like senior brother Yunfan would feel embarrassed in mentioning his beloved woman. He was truly a hero who felt sorry for the beauty. Thinking of the words, beloved woman, the smile on Xiang Nan's face suddenly disappeared. Body refinement, especially the ability to resist lightning, was a secret. Xiang Nan definitely did not dare to carry out it in the nature sect, so as not to overlook others. The Haoran mountain range was a mountain that plunged into Haotian City. One stretched to the east of Haotian City, and the farthest point was the East China Sea. It was named after the Haoran sect. Xiang Nan entered the 100,000 mountains of the vast Haoran mountain range by himself and walked all the way to an extremely far-reaching uninhabited land. It was rumored that the Haoran mountain range was still a ferocious land filled with demonic beasts, and its dangers were several levels higher than those of the primordial swamp. After that, the Haoran sect was located here, suppressing the entire Haoran mountain range. For thousands of years, the great demons in the Haoran mountain range had gradually dispersed, leaving behind little demonic beasts that were not worth mentioning. However, it was said that there were still some unborn demonic beasts hiding in the Haoran mountain range cultivating bitterly, but they didn't dare to appear because they were afraid of the awe of the Haoran sect. Xiang Nan found a quiet place and put down the rented pill furnace. Then, he took out dozens of spirit herbs, Qingling San, and earth desolate wood. I hope I can succeed once. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and jumped into the pill furnace. He only had one earth desolate tree, and he couldn't do it again if he failed once. Fortunately, Xiang Nan already had experience in body refinement. This time, he was able to do it safely and successfully. After finishing his body refinement, Xiang Nan discovered that his physical strength had increased by another level. After that, he carefully took out the lightning talisman and threw it into the air. The lightning talisman immediately flashed with lightning. I wonder when I will be able to absorb the lightning talisman into my body. I hope that day will come soon. Xiang Nan sat down cross-legged, secretly circulating the 9 transformations of thunder, pulling out a fierce arc of lightning, and then inserting it into his body. This was the 3rd time Xiang Nan had truly absorbed the power of the white flame lightning flame. Its strength was nearly 10 times that of the previous time, and it could reach about 1% of the power of the white flame lightning flame. And that terrifying and shocking thunder and lightning force rampaged through Xiang Nan's body, forcing Xiang Nan's face to turn pale. He endured the pain and gritted his teeth as he continued. Very quickly, that arc of lightning suddenly expanded and turned into a huge ball of lightning that wrapped around Xiang Nan's entire body. His realm began to loosen. Early stage, middle stage, late stage and late stage of the first stage of origin return. Early stage, middle stage, late stage and late stage of the second stage of origin return. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth. At this moment, signs of decomposition appeared on his body again. He was almost unable to withstand the tearing power of the lightning. No, the second level of origin return is simply not enough. I have endured so much hardship, and it took me a lot of effort to gather all the ingredients to refine my body. I can't just raise my cultivation by a small level. Again, continue. Xiang Nan roared, and the blood in his entire body began to boil. If it wasn't for the fact that the 9 transformations of thunder shocking were too complicated, he would have really wanted to get an avatar out and share half of the pain with himself. That unimaginable pain gave Xiang Nan the feeling that he could not survive and could not die. He wished that he could immediately cut off his own life. At this time, his realm loosened again, and he reached the late stage of the second great origin reversion. 3rd level of origin return. Boom! Xiang Nan suddenly opened his eyes and threw the remaining lightning power in his body into the sky with his lightning trembled martial technique. Immediately after fist, a total of 16 fists flew out. 16 fan-shaped bolts of lightning shot through the sky before the excess lightning power was evacuated. As for his body, He also retained a portion of the power of lightning for a rainy day. Ah! Strength! Strength! Xiang Nan raised his head. There was a roaring and surging power in his body, making him want to vent it. He kicked the ground with his right foot and exploded into the air with a loud boom. This jump was actually 50 meters away. He looked at his hands, his new realm, his new avatar imprint, and the newly filled power of lightning. This made him confident in the next examination. 12 Sex Joint Examination. Xiang Nan clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. I must make everyone look at me differently. I, Xiang Nan, have my own true strength. I don't have to rely on a heavenly demon cult demonic woman to increase my popularity. Why are you cursing me when you haven't seen me for a day? Suddenly, a voice of dissatisfaction came from the side. Xiang Nan hurriedly turned around and saw that the dream butterfly was not far away in the air, tilting her head to look at herself. You actually dare to come? Xiang Nan was stunned and asked, do you know that this is the back mountain of the Haoran sect? Are you here to die? The dream butterfly giggled, you said that you don't care about me. The first thing you said was not to kill me, but to care about me. Xiang Nan said angrily, don't talk nonsense. You've hurt me. Because of you, I almost got expelled from the sect. I beg you, hurry up and leave. Xiang Nan had no way to deal with this dream butterfly. He couldn't beat it again and again, so he couldn't drive it away. He really didn't know what to do. Chapter 208 One Heart, Free Uses. The dream butterfly tilted her head and frowned, I like you so much, but why do you hate me so much? Am I not pretty enough? Because you have no humanity. You killed so many people for no reason, Xiang Nan said. You didn't even blink an eye. Meng Dieki said, whether I kill or not has nothing to do with whether you like me or not. I won't kill you. Xiang Nan sneered, you just have to kill people regardless of the consequences. Do you know that the people you killed are likely to have white-haired mothers and babies waiting for him to raise them at home? Do you know what it feels like to lose a child? If there is hatred between you two, then forget it. But if you don't know them at all, you can kill them. There must be a reason to kill, right? Meng Dai said impatiently, you righteous Taoists are thinking too much. Kill them and don't care what they do. What does it have to do with me? Yes. Xiang Nan nodded, so we won't be on the same path, and I won't fall in love with a witch like you who kills people without blinking an eye. You go, no matter what method you use, I won't fall in love with you. I won't leave. What exactly do you like about me? We've only known each other for a few days. Like is like, what reason do you need to ask? Meng Dai thought for a moment and said, since you don't like me like this, then I will make myself your type. One day, you will accept me. With that, the dream butterfly fluttered away. As soon as dream butterfly left, Xiang Nan also left. To tell the truth, Xiang Nan did not take her words to heart. This kind of evil cult's demonic woman always thought about it one day at a time. She liked him now, and perhaps she would like others in a few days. It was like she liked a toy. There would always be times when she would get tired of it. The two of them couldn't be happy for long. This kind of impulsive love was just a joke. After returning to the Haoran sect, everyone Xiang Nan had seen still looked at him with excessive attention, either ridicule or envy, but Xiang Nan didn't care. When Xiang Nan passed by the credit hall, a small group of Li Jian and the others also came out. Xiang Nan. Congratulations. Li Jian ran over and said, your sons have really become number one on the Hawks rankings. Xiang Nan smiled and said, it was just a fluke. I only received a few good missions. Li Jian said, but you have to be careful. I saw that Muro Wanqing and Shen Linhai's team have also caught up. Today, they have also entered the top 10 of the Eagle rankings. Oh. Xiang Nan's eyes lit up, looks like they are also working very hard. Haha, number 1 on the Eagle rankings. Xiang Nan, it's you, right? At this time, a team walked out of the credit hall. Xiang Nan didn't know the captain of the team, so he said, "May I ask who you are?" The captain was tall and straight, with sharp eyebrows and tiger eyes. He possessed a temperament that only large clans possessed. He was a typical handsome man loved by countless young girls. The moment this person came out, it caused the female disciples to scream. Wow, look! It's senior brother Jiang Cheng. It really is senior brother Jiang Cheng. I heard that senior brother Jiang Cheng is the god brother that senior sister Mu Sueki recognized. That's right. Senior brother Jiang Cheng is the strongest. Then what does Xiang Nan count as? He only managed to surpass senior brother Jiang Cheng's team by taking a few easy missions. That's right, senior brother Jiang Cheng will definitely regain the first place. Then Xiang Nan won't be rampant for long. Xiang Nan was stunned when he heard their screams. Since when have people been so arrogant? However, listening to their cries, Xiang Nan knew the identity of the man in front of him. It turned out that Jiang Chengcheng was the captain of the first team on the Eagle rankings, and he was the one who pushed him down. I shouldn't have to introduce myself, right? Jiang Cheng smiled faintly at Xiang Nan. I've heard of you. After knowing that you've come to the Haran sect, you've done a few things that have quite an impact. You are the one who defeated our second-grade academy, Li Hai. You are also the one who won the first place on the Eagle rankings, right? Hearing this person's tone, Xiang Nan couldn't help but frown. Originally, he and Jiang Cheng didn't know each other, but this was the first time he had met Jiang Cheng, yet he had used such a questioning tone to ask him. Moreover, his aura was still so aggressive. Jiang Cheng added, "You said so yourself. You were able to climb to the first place because of good luck, but you have to know that luck doesn't always exist." After saying that, Jiang Cheng looked at Xiang Nan head-on and walked over. The other 4 teammates beside Jiang Cheng also stared at Xiang Nan and brushed past him. There was even a short fellow who deliberately knocked Xiang Nan on the shoulder. After they left, Li Jian curled his lips and said, "Who is it?" "Xiang Nan, don't be like them." Xiang Nan didn't take it to heart and said, "There are still 4 days left before the special college entrance examination. Li Jian, prepare well and strive to enter the second-grade academy." Li Jian shrugged his shoulders. "I know very well that it is impossible, but I will work hard." "Yes." Xiang Nan patted Li Jian on the shoulder and said, "All right, I'll go back first. I'll see you in the special hospital exam." After parting ways with Li Jian, Xiang Nan recalled Jiang Cheng's strength. This Jiang Cheng was indeed very strong. He was at the 5th level of origin return. He didn't know if he was the number 1 expert, but he was definitely an expert in the first echelon. After returning to Sun Peak, Xiang Nan began to prepare for the final stage. Now that he had reached the 3rd level of origin return, the Sun God technique and the Avatar seal might be able to take another step forward. The Avatar seal could split up to 7 external avatars. Right now, Xiang Nan only grasped the 1st level and could only split 1 avatar. He sat beside the pond water behind Sun Hall, his hands continuously forming seals, trying to raise the clone seal's level again and again. However, no matter how hard Xiang Nan tried, he couldn't differentiate a second avatar. After failing for 3 hours, Xiang Nan rubbed his temples and said, "It's a little tricky." The second level of the avatar seal wasn't too difficult. Xiang Nan knew that as long as he practiced hard, he would be able to master it. But the most important thing was that he needed to focus on 3 things in order to separate out the second avatar. It's like having one hand draw a circle on the ground, the other hand draw a triangle, and one foot draw a rectangle, and it's done at the same time. It was so difficult to create 3 simple symbols with one mind and 3 uses. Not to mention, it was necessary to circulate complex incantations to maintain the existence of the avatar and possess combat ability. How should I solve this? Xiang Nan thought hard and couldn't find a way out. Forget it. Let's practice the sun god technique first. We'll think of a way to cultivate a second avatar later. Chapter 209 Written Examination. Xiang Nan had already memorized the sun god technique, so he didn't need to prepare for it in advance. The sun divine art was divided into 3 stages: the earth yang third layer, the heaven yang third layer, and the blazing sun third layer. The third level of earth yang could be used to temper the sun, borrowing the power of the sun. The third level of heaven yang could condense a real phantom of the sun, and the third level of intense sun could compare itself to the sun, releasing infinite brilliance. The earth yang second layer that Xiang Nan wanted to train was still in the first stage, but it could greatly increase the power of the sun quenching and increase his combat strength by an unprecedented amount. Xiang Nan sat down cross-legged, using the method of guiding light to draw down a gentle beam of sunlight, enveloping himself. He discovered that before today, there was a limit to what he could do to attract light. If he wanted to attract more sunlight, he would not be able to do so. However, this time, he discovered that there was a new gap in the light guide. Sure enough, raising my cultivation realm will allow me to cultivate a stronger sun god technique. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat as he tried his best to break through the restriction of the earth yang first layer. Then, the beam of sunlight that shone on him began to widen at a slow speed. At the first level of the earth yang realm, regardless of whether it was the light source or the sun quenching, the sunlight was only 2 meters in diameter, and it had almost just enveloped Xiang Nan. But at this moment, the diameter of the daylight began to increase, slowly increasing to 2.1 meters, 2.2 meters. Xiang Nan practiced all day and night, finally increasing the daylight to a width of 3 meters. However, it seemed that this was still not the limit. Xiang Nan was extremely tired from cultivating day and night. He simply lay in the pool water and fell asleep. After waking up, he continued cultivating. However, the further he cultivated, the more difficult it would be. In the following day and night, he could only increase the width of the sun to 3.2 meters. His progress was very slow. Continue sleeping, replenish your spirit, and then cultivate again. In the next 2 days and nights, Xiang Nan increased the width of the daylight to 3.5 meters. Although it still hadn't reached its limit, Xiang Nan had roughly guessed the limit of the earth yang second layer. If you cultivate the earth yang second layer to perfection, you can increase the width of the light drawing and sun tempering to a full 4 meters. Xiang Nan saw that there were still 2 hours before dawn, so he hurriedly took a rest. After dawn, he woke up on time. Today was the day of the examination in the special hospital. Before leaving Sun Peak, Xiang Nan was ruthless and came to temper the sun. In the sky, a fierce beam of sunlight landed on Xiang Nan's body. The sunlight was exactly 3.5 meters wide. This power is too shocking. Xiang Nan bent down and clenched his fists forcefully. Under the intense quenching of the sun, his black hair turned white and his eyes shone like 2 sunstones. Waves of qi surged around Xiang Nan and raged in all directions. Luminescence wouldn't trigger a backlash, but the sun-tempering society. Xiang Nan didn't dare to continue quenching the sun and hurriedly put it away. Xiang Nan was incomparably excited. The power of the sun at the first level of the Earth-Yang realm was different from that at the second level of the Earth-Yang realm. If he encountered the 8-step scorpion again, he should be able to shatter it in an instant. Xiang Nan was full of confidence as he walked down Sun Peak. However, at the waist of Sun Peak, he saw a beautiful woman. "Is that Xiang Nan?" The woman put her hands behind her back and smiled sweetly at Xiang Nan. "Who are you?" Xiang Nan was curious. He had never seen this person before, but his first impression of this woman was quite good. The woman looked like a scholar, and she looked very gentle and sensible. "My name is Yang Liener. I'm your senior sister from your second-grade academy." Yang Liener walked over to Xiang Nan step by step with her hands behind her back and stretched out her right hand. In her palm was a small porcelain bottle. "So it's senior sister Yang. Why are you looking for me?" Xiang Nan was puzzled. Yang Liener smiled sweetly. "I admire your character very much. I want to make friends with you. This is a Tier 2 Foundation establishment pill. It can be considered as a greeting gift for you." Xiang Nan was puzzled. "Senior sister Yang is waiting for me here specifically to give me medicinal pills. I can't take it without reward." Yang Liener shoved the porcelain bottle into Xiang Nan's hand and gently shook her hand. "Goodbye." Xiang Nan was confused and pulled out the cork of the porcelain bottle. Instantly, a fragrance floated out. It was indeed a Foundation establishment pill of good quality. However, if he wanted to speak again, Yang Liener had already floated away. Alright, it's not a bad thing for someone to be willing to make friends with him when his reputation is in disrepute. Xiang Nan's favorable impression of Yang Liener increased a little. The Foundation establishment pill was a kind of pill that could stabilize the foundation of martial arts. Normally, a martial artist would be able to stabilize the foundation of martial arts after they had just upgraded their cultivation realm. Xiang Nan smiled, put away the porcelain bottle and hurried down the mountain. In the special college examination, all first-grade students were qualified to participate. At this moment, the students from the 3 academies followed their mentors to the outer building of Haran Palace. The 3,000 students sat down neatly. The 5 peak masters, Elder Shi Beihong, and all the teachers of the first-grade academy had arrived. It was still these people, the room where the factions were divided. Elder Shi Beihong stood out and said, "Half a year ago, I was here to welcome you new students. Today is the time to test your personal abilities." Xiang Nan raised his head and looked at his master. Su Kaiyu seemed to be nurturing herself with her eyes closed. As for the other 4 peak masters, they were all extremely proud. Obviously, they were very confident in their disciples. "Sunset, come on, fight for first place," Wu Qinfeng from the sword sect said with a smile. "Master, don't worry, this disciple will definitely fight for it." Murong Wanqing nodded her head forcefully, her eyes subconsciously drifting towards Xiang Nan. "All right." Elder Shi Beihong clapped his hands and attracted everyone's attention. Everyone should have heard that the 12-sect joint examination is imminent, so our special academy examination should be simple. This time, there are 2 parts to the examination, the written examination and the martial examination. Let's begin the written examination. Elder Shi Beihong said, "Next, I will do a basic martial skill drill." As he spoke, Elder Shi Beihong pointed forward with his right hand, and a beam of Yuan Qi immediately shot out. However, halfway through, it suddenly exploded and turned into a beautiful snow lotus flower. The students couldn't help but laugh. What kind of martial skill was this? It was just using yuan qi to play tricks. A student said proudly, "Elder, this move of yours looks down on us too much. If you want to learn this move, I won't brag. I can learn it in 10 minutes. Yuan qi transforming into snow lotus flowers was a type of yuan qi manipulation. Whether it was the circulation of yuan qi in the meridians or the manipulation after yuan qi was released, it was very basic. The disciple who spoke happened to be a disciple of the Qi sect. He was confident in controlling this playful yuan qi, which was why he dared to say those words. "Is that so?" Elder Shi asked with a smile. The disciple said, "Of course. Please tell us the incantation, Elder." This disciple was pleased with himself and thought to himself, "I said that 10 minutes is a modest statement. If I work hard, 9 minutes should be enough." It wasn't just him, the other disciples also felt the same way. They always felt that this written examination was simply a child's play. However, Elder Shi smiled and said, "I didn't tell you to learn this move. Instead, I told you to write down the incantation of this move for 2 hours." What? All of a sudden, the scene exploded. All of the previously confident disciples were dumbfounded as if they had seen a ghost. The disciple who spoke earlier was shocked and said, Elder, have you ever told us the incantation? This. Elder Shi looked at the disciple and said, "The written exam examines martial arts theory. If I tell you the incantation, what else would I test? That's why." Xiang Nan smiled faintly. "It's broken." All of a sudden, many disciples scratched their ears and cheeks, sweating profusely. "I'll give you a simple move, so that you can write out the incantation of this move just by looking at it with your eyes. The person taking the entrance exam is really the foundation of martial arts theory. With such a simple first-round written test, almost 90% of the students were blocked from entering the second-grade academy. Who among these students would always run to Haran Academy to take classes seriously? Everyone was busy doing tasks and cultivating. Who would have thought that this was the kind of thing that the special academy would take the exam for? Chapter 210 Martial Examination. When most of the disciples had expressions of despair on their faces, Xiang Nan had already taken out a pen and paper and started writing. However, the disciple was still a little unconvinced. He said, "I don't believe it. Could it be that the senior brothers of the second-grade academy have all taken the exam before? We simply don't have enough time to study." Elder Shi said, "Naturally, they did not pass the exam. This written exam is specially prepared for you. Do you think it is very difficult? If it is not difficult, how can it be said to be a special school exam? How could they admit 10 outstanding students?" The disciple simply put down his pen and paper and said, "I can't write it out. I'd better wait for the formal examination before entering the second-grade academy." Looking at the Qi sect's Jinyang Peak advocating high yuan, he glared at the disciple with hatred and said, "Shut up. Isn't it embarrassing enough?" The disciple's neck shrank, and he no longer dared to speak. Elder Shi Beihong ignored the talkative disciple and focused his gaze on Xiang Nan. When he saw that it didn't matter, his gaze immediately froze. The other disciples were all meditating, but Xiang Nan had already written an entire incantation. "Huh?" Elder Shi Beihong quickly walked to Xiang Nan's side. He thought that Xiang Nan was only interested in speed and writing nonsense. However, after seeing Xiang Nan's specific incantation, Elder Shi stroked his beard and smiled. He nodded repeatedly, "Children can be taught. Elder, I'm done. Xiang Nan brushed off the last stroke and presented a simple incantation paragraph and a half. What? All the disciples were shocked at the same time. This was less than 5 minutes from the beginning. Finished. Murong Wanqing and the other 5 descendants of aristocratic families were also writing. It seemed that they did not neglect their studies, but even if they were as strong as Murong Wanqing, they had only just started writing. They had only written a few simple words. Thus, Murong Wanqing and the others looked at Xiang Nan with incredulous eyes. You've written it, but can you practice it? Elder Shi Beihong asked. Hearing this, everyone was in despair. Obviously, Xiang Nan's incantation was correct. Sure. Xiang Nan respectfully nodded his head, stood up, and pointed out in front of the crowd. A stream of yuan qi flew out. Although the speed and intensity of this yuan qi was far from being comparable to Elder Shi's, it had indeed condensed into a snow lotus flower halfway through. Furthermore, it was intact and horrifying. Not even a single petal was incomplete. Ha 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 ha, good. 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 Elder Shi rarely laughed out loud, truly a genius without doubt. Xiang Nan, you've passed. Go to your master's place and wait for the next step. The other 4 peak masters looked at Su Kaiyu with envious eyes. They thought to themselves, why didn't Nan choose their own faction back then? What a pity. Xiang Nan respectfully came to Su Caiyue's side and whispered, Master, how did I do? What? Su Kaiyu raised her eyelids slightly and said, You are my disciple. Aren't you supposed to be the first? All right. Xiang Nan laughed dryly and was struck down by his master again. However, he was already used to it. Xiang Nan went to look at Murong Wanqing and the other 5 and noticed that Murong Wanqing had already finished writing her first incantation, so she nodded silently. Xiang Nan truly admired Murong Wanqing for being able to finish it quickly because of his accumulation in his previous life, and for Murong Wanqing to not let go of her martial arts theory in the gap between missions. As for Shenlin Hai, Jiang Yu, and the others, they also began to write, which meant that they already had a rudimentary incantation in their hearts. As time passed, Murong Wanqing finished writing the incantation and practiced it on the spot in just an hour. Her performance was perfect. As for Shenlin Hai and the others, they had completed it one after another, and the difference between them was not more than 10 minutes. After the 2-hour deadline had passed, the number of disciples who were able to write the incantation far exceeded Xiang Nan's expectations. In total, more than 400 people were able to write the incantation. However, out of these 400 people, there were actually more than 290 disciples from Zhaohua Peak. The Fortune Peak disciples' martial arts talent wasn't too good, so they put more effort into their studies. Half of the other 100 people were from the Qi sect, and the rest were divided among the other factions. Time's up. Elder Shi clapped his hands and said, the eliminated students can go back. The winning disciples can stay. The defeated disciples shook their heads and sighed as they left. It was unknown what they were feeling. Next is the martial examination. Elder Shi said, most of the time, the competition rules chosen in the martial examination are arena competitions, but arena competitions have certain limitations. Although the arena competition could consider the strength of a disciple, luck also played a large part. If the first expert and the second expert happened to be in the same group, then the second expert would be eliminated if he failed. This situation was obviously unfair. Since it was the entrance exam, he naturally had to pick out the students with the most potential, not the ones with the most luck. Elder Shi said, therefore, the rule of the martial examination is to release your own martial arts on the spot and win the top 10. The fortune peak will be able to recruit 2 disciples on its own. It is not comparable to the disciples of other sections. All of a sudden, many disciples released their Yuan Qi one after another. In that field, the third revolution astral Qi, Xiantian astral Qi, and primordial astral Qi surged endlessly. You and you win. Elder Shi walked through the crowd of disciples, continuously pointing out disciples. The first to win was Murong Wanqing, followed by Shen Linhai and the others. They all advanced without any surprise. After Elder Shi selected the 9th disciple, he glanced at Xiang Nan, because up until now, Xiang Nan hadn't made a move. The Sun God technique was different from other techniques and could not be operated for a long time. Seeing that the time was almost right, Xiang Nan released his own technique. Immediately, a beam of sunlight 2 meters wide landed on Xiang Nan's body. He concealed his true strength. At this moment, all the disciples present were stunned and turned to Xiang Nan one by one. Oh! Peak Master Wu Qingfeng stood up and said, Xiang Nan has indeed learned the Sun God technique. The last disciple to win is Sun Peak, Xiang Nan. Shi Beihong pointed at Xiang Nan. I'm not convinced. A disciple stepped forward and said, everyone knows that the early stage of the Sun God technique is incomparably formidable, but there is no late stage of this technique. It is impossible to complete it. Using this kind of cultivation technique is a speculation. Is that so? Su Kaiyu opened her eyes and looked at the disciple. Otherwise, why don't you come to Sun Peak and try your luck? The student didn't expect a peak master to suddenly speak, and he was so scared that he didn't dare to say anything. Kaiyu is still so angry. Zhang Haiyuan shook his head helplessly. Chapter 211 Demon Suppressing Pill. When everyone released their Yuan Qi, Xiang Nan paid special attention to Murong Wanqing. Murong Wanqing could be said to be a monster. She had just advanced to the 3rd level of the Origin Return Realm a while ago, but now she was already at the late stage of the 3rd level of the Origin Return Realm. Perhaps she would become an expert at the 4th level of the Origin Return Realm when the 12 sects took the joint examination. Furthermore, Xiang Nan noticed a detail. Murong Wanqing, like him, did not display her full strength. Instead, she hid part of it. Xiang Nan played a little trick. Lightning flashed in his eyes and he went to spy on Murong Wanqing's spiritual sea. However, when he saw this, he was incomparably shocked. Within Murong Wanqing's spiritual sea, there was actually a ball of blazing flames. Spirit fire. Xiang Nan's heart trembled slightly. This Murong Wanqing was truly an incredible woman. Between heaven and earth, all living things gave birth to a variety of super spirit body elements that did not belong to nature itself. Divine lightning could be considered a super spirit body element, and could be regarded as a lightning element. Apart from the divine lightning, there were also fire-type spirit flames, wood-type spirit wood, water-type ice souls, earth-type golden spirits, and wind-type wind spirit cores. These super spirit body elements also had their own rankings. For example, the flexible rankings had powerful void flames, earth fiend demon fire, ice spirit clear fire, and so on. Of course, in the rankings of these super spiritual bodies, the one that occupied the highest position was the divine lightning. What Xiang Nan did not expect was that Murong Wanqing had secretly absorbed a spiritual flame to cultivate. Although the spiritual fire was not found on the rankings, it should be of a very low level. If I had absorbed the lightning at the bottom of the divine lightning rankings from the beginning, I would have been able to completely absorb it now, right? Xiang Nan sighed, but there was nothing he could do. Bai Yen Lightning was ranked 17th on the Divine Lightning rankings. The power of this Divine Lightning was simply too strong, and it could not be completely absorbed at present. However, if one wanted to find a Divine Lightning of a lower level, there was nowhere to be found. Xiang Nan could only secretly envy Murong Wanqing's good luck. In this way, even if the entire examination ended, the original rule was that 10 students would be promoted. In fact, with the addition of the 2 Fortune Peak disciples who were exceptionally admitted, there were a total of 12 people, and among them, Li Jian was actually one of them. Xiang Nan. Li Jian ran over excitedly and grabbed Xiang Nan's arm, saying, "I've also advanced. I'm going to enter the 2nd grade academy too. Congratulations." Xiang Nan sincerely congratulated him and said, "Your character is kind and you are willing to work hard. I know that you will definitely be able to do it." "All right." Shi Beihong clapped his hands and said, "The special college examination has ended. The main purpose of preparing for such a special examination this time is to allow students with the ability of a 1st-grade college to participate in the 12 joint examinations. The 12 of you were carefully selected. You must display your strengths in the 12th consecutive exam and fight for glory for our nature sect. The team of foreign patrol lecturers will leave soon. If the journey goes smoothly, there will be 12 joint examinations in 2 months. Everyone, please arrange a time and disband." When he left the outer building of Haran Palace, Murong Wanqing brushed past Xiang Nan and whispered, "I will definitely surpass you." Xiang Nan smiled and didn't say anything. Ever since the last battle with Li Hai, his relationship with the disciples of the 5 aristocratic families had become much more relaxed. At least, there wasn't any hostility between them anymore. After returning to Sun Peak, Xiang Nan took out the foundation establishment pill that Yang Liener had given him and swallowed it in one gulp. Then, he crossed his legs to refine the medicinal properties of the pill. That foundation establishment pill was indeed not bad. It calmed down the restless realm energy in Xiang Nan's body and slowly settled down. The foundation of martial arts gradually became solid. "I wonder what realm Wang Xiaoyun is at now," Xiang Nan thought. When he left the Wulong continent, Wang Xiaoyun was at the 5th level of the origin realm. After that battle, Wang Xiaoyun would definitely cultivate even more crazily. Moreover, he was also a core disciple of the Blazing Fire sect and would definitely be nurtured vigorously. Even if it was a conservative estimate, Wang Xiaoyun should be at least at the 6th level of origin return, right? The difference between his and his realms was not small. Next was the 12 joint examinations. At that time, the strongest opponent that would appear would be at the 5th level of the origin return realm. It's stressful. Xiang Nan smoothed out the time. He still had 2 months left. During this period of time, he had to cultivate the Sun God technique to the peak of the Earth Yang 2nd Great Circle. At the same time, he had to solve the problem of the 2nd level of the Avatar Seal. Only by possessing 2 external avatars would one have the confidence to fight against experts at the 5th level of the origin realm. As for the recipe for stronger lightning resistance, it was at the higher levels of the Heavenly Secrets Hall. With Xiang Nan's current team level, he did not have the authority to view it. Only after obtaining good results in the 12 joint examinations would he be eligible to obtain it. Since he was unable to make a fuss in his cultivation realm, he still had to start with the clone imprint. But, how can I do this with 1 mind and 3 uses? Xiang Nan thought hard for a long time before suddenly seeing the porcelain bottle in his hand. He patted his forehead and said, "Right. I can't do 3 things on my own, but perhaps I can use external forces to help." There are still many kinds of pills that can calm the mind and clear the heart. That's right, let's go to Tianji Hall to look for them. The focus of the three uses was on concentrating one's mind. There was no room for distraction. With the help of pills, it would be much easier. Xiang Nan quickly arrived at the medicinal pill library of the Heavenly Secrets Hall. There were many types of pills that could calm the mind and clear the heart. The effects of these pills were similar, but there was still a specific gap. If they were not used correctly, the expected effects would not be achieved. Xiang Nan searched around and found a formula for the primary demon suppressing pill. That's it. Xiang Nan's eyes lit up. When cultivating, martial artists would sometimes get into trouble because they were unable to comprehend an incantation. If they insisted on continuing cultivating, they would become enchanted. Even if he was lucky enough to survive the enchantment, if this martial artist continued to cultivate other martial arts, he would still get twice the result with half the effort, and his efficiency would be extremely low. This was because a martial artist had already planted a seed of the heart demon in their hearts, causing them to fear their hands and feet. The demon-suppressing pill was a pill that could solve this problem. It could expel martial artists and distracting thoughts from the Tao heart. The reason why it was difficult to concentrate on three uses was because of the inability to concentrate spiritual energy and too many distractions. If one used the demon-suppressing pill to solve these problems, it would simply be perfect. However, this elementary demon-suppressing pill was a third-grade pill. Although it was only a formula, it was still worth 200 credits and was incomparably expensive. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and exchanged the formula. There were only 50 credits left in his waste token. He decided to exchange the last 50 credits for a high-grade spirit pill furnace. This furnace could withstand the power of refining fourth-grade pills at most. Xiang Nan touched his waste token again, and it was empty. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He had used up all the credits he had earned from risking his life. Chapter 212: A Boring Celebration. As for the demon-suppressing pill, there were many kinds of ingredients, including more than 20 kinds of spirit herbs. However, one of the ingredients made Xiang Nan's eyes shine. Qingling powder. The third-grade demon-suppressing pill also required Qingling powder, and he had just 2 bottles. He had used one last time, and the remaining bottle could be used this time. Heavens help me! Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief. At the very least, he didn't need to make another trip to the 100-beast cliff. Qingling powder was the most expensive and important ingredient in the demon-suppressing pill. Apart from Qingling powder and spirit herbs, there were 3 other ingredients that needed to be collected. Tears of demons. As the name implies, the tears of 20 demonic beasts are refined into crystals. There is no limit to the level of demonic beasts. Demon spirit grass, a kind of demon herb that is often produced in the land of the fall of a group of demons. It is not within the scope of spirit herbs and is bred from the resentment of countless demon beast souls. And finally, Qinxiang pills. Hissed Xiang Nan frowned. Tears of demons and demon spirit grass were easy to obtain. They were found in the Haoran mountain range. Back then, the Haoran mountain range had been suppressed by the Haoran sect, and countless demons had been killed. They would definitely be able to nurture demon spirit grass. But this Qinxiang pill. Xiang Nan instantly felt a headache. Why did he need this kind of thing in the demon-suppressing pill? Qinxiang pill was easy to deal with, but it was really troublesome to deal with, because it was something only a woman would swallow. After consuming the Qinxiang pill, the woman's body would emit a faint fragrance from the inside out. It was as refreshing as an orchid in an empty valley. This fragrance would persist for several months, and it was countless times more valuable than the powder that ordinary women applied. However, the ingredients to make the Qinxiang pill were all from the western regions. If one wanted to make it themselves, there was basically no hope, unless one went to the western regions a million kilometers away. What should we do? Xiang Nan was extremely depressed. In the end, he had no choice but to go to Zhengyang Peak to find Jiang Yu. After Xiang Nan explained his intentions, Jiang Yu covered her mouth and smiled for a long time. Xiang Nan rubbed his nose awkwardly and said, "Then what? Your Jiang family is one of the 5 aristocratic families in Donghai province. I wonder if there is such a thing." "Xiang Nan, I can't tell, you're a grown man. You're quite fond of beauty." Jiang Yu's face turned red with laughter. Xiang Nan felt even more embarrassed. This is not for swallowing, but for other purposes. Jiang Yu finally suppressed her laughter and said, "To be honest, our Jiang clan does not have such a thing. The Qinxiang pill is a tribute from the western regions. Only those famous ladies in Haojing have it. But they are all important figures of the upper class. They shouldn't receive you, much less give you a precious fragrance pill." "Ah, I think so too." Xiang Nan shook his head helplessly. It seemed that he couldn't get the Qinxiang pill. He could only give up on the demon-suppressing pill. "Hey, don't leave yet." Jiang Yu grabbed Xiang Nan's arm and said, "We're all going to Drunken Dream Pavilion tonight to celebrate our entrance to school. Come with us." Xiang Nan shook his head, "I won't go anymore. If I go, it will only make things more awkward." The people gathered were from the 5 aristocratic families. Although Xiang Nan and them no longer had any obvious hostility, their relationship could not be said to be very harmonious. Could it be that they ran over and let others ridicule them? "It's fine. Sunset and the others are not as stingy as you think." Jiang Yu guessed Xiang Nan's thoughts and said, "Also, I can help you ask there. Perhaps Sunset Qing has Qinxiang pills in her hands. Their Murong aristocratic family is very close to some important figures in Haojing." This. All right. When Xiang Nan heard that Qin Xiang Wan still had a show to play, he could only bravely agree. It was night, and the better it was for Xiang Nan and Jiang Yu to go to the Drunken Dream Pavilion, this young man's pastime. That Drunken Dream Pavilion was originally the Jiang clan's business, so Xiang Nan naturally entered smoothly this time. Today's Drunken Dream Pavilion was as lively as usual. Jiang Yu brought Xiang Nan all the way to a courtyard in the Heaven Brand. There were already quite a few people in the courtyard. Although this time it was to celebrate the completion of the entrance exam, it wasn't just Xiang Nan and the others who came to celebrate together. There were also more than 100 people who came to curry favor with the 5 aristocratic families. Murong Wanqing and the other 4 descendants of aristocratic families sat at one table alone, while the other 100+ people were divided into 5 tables. During the banquet, every student desperately searched for an opportunity to toast at Murong Wanqing's table. When Xiang Nan and Jiang Yu entered, everyone stopped moving and all their eyes fell on Xiang Nan alone. To be honest, Xiang Nan didn't like this kind of entertainment, especially since his current identity was sensitive. Facing the pair of eyes, Xiang Nan felt very uncomfortable. If it wasn't for the Qinxiang pill, he would have already turned around and left. "Coming?" Murong Wanqing shot a sidelong glance at Xiang Nan and said, "Sit down. Please, Jiang Yu." Xiang Nan whispered to Jiang Yu before walking towards the table of an ordinary student. "Xiang Nan." Jiang Yu grabbed Xiang Nan and said, "Sit with us." As he spoke, regardless of whether Xiang Nan was willing or not, he placed Xiang Nan on the high table and sat down with Murong Wanqing and Shenlin Hai. There were only 6 people on this big table. However, after he sat down, Xiang Nan became more and more uncomfortable. The disciples of the aristocratic families at this table were all talking about business matters. What precious and good things had they gotten from their clans recently? Originally, this was a celebration, so everyone had some relaxed topics to discuss. This Nan was understandable, but he was unable to integrate with them. As for the disciples on the other 5 tables, they were actually chatting about the 5 aristocratic families. Occasionally, someone would shout loudly. Of course. The Murong clan is a famous clan in the East China Sea. Of course, their wealth is all over the world. The Shen clan is also very powerful. Weapons business. These people were obviously flattering him, making Xiang Nan feel embarrassed for them just by listening. What Xiang Nan liked was the scene of a group of friends drinking wine in a big bowl, eating meat in large mouthfuls, chatting and laughing happily. A celebrities gathering like this was filled with high-end and high-grade topics. Xiang Nan really didn't have the slightest interest in it, nor did he know much about it. He could only bore his head and drink wine cup by cup. He was almost unable to sit down anymore. Xiang Nan, you're here. At this moment, a group of people passed by the gate of the courtyard. One of them shouted Xiang Nan's name. Xiang Nan looked in the direction and saw Yang Liener standing at the door. Senior Sister Yang. Xiang Nan finally laughed. Yang Liener also smiled and said, "It's really hard to find you. I went to the Sun Peak specifically, but I couldn't find you. Later, I heard that you came to the Drunken Dream Pavilion. Come and sit with us. We have reserved seats in the courtyard beside us. Let me introduce you to some of our senior brothers. You are already a student of the 2nd grade academy." Xiang Nan originally didn't want to follow him. After all, he really couldn't get along well with the people from the 2nd grade academy. He was even in a hostile state. However, due to Yang Liener's face, she could only reply, "You guys go first. I'll go over to toast in a while. Damn it, I'm sick of it tonight." What Xiang Nan didn't know was that after Yang Liener's group entered another courtyard, someone whispered, "Liener, is that the person you're looking for? Is that Xiang Nan? I'm afraid he'll be able to handle it tonight. I just don't know if it's appropriate to do so." Her soft words were meaningful, but people didn't know what she was plotting. Chapter 213 Toast. After Yang Liener and the others left, Murong Wanqing took a glance at Xiang Nan with her wine glass and said indifferently, "When did you get together with the people from the 2nd grade academy? They quickly put aside their past grudges and shook hands with you." Xiang Nan really couldn't stand their small glasses of wine and their shallow taste. Even if he grabbed a large crystal bowl containing fruit on the table and poured out the cut fruit, he filled the large crystal bowl with wine and drank it all in one gulp. Xiang Nan happily wiped his lips and said to Murong Wanqing, "You don't have to provoke me in a weird manner. I'm not that familiar with those people from the 2nd grade academy. Everyone, excuse me for a moment." After saying that, Xiang Nan carried the large crystal bowl and walked towards another courtyard. Murong Wanqing was so angry that her 2 rows of silver teeth almost shattered. Just now, Xiang Nan's big bowl of good wine looked stuffy, as if he was purposely showing it to them. It's like saying, "You people, you don't talk happily, you don't do things happily, you don't even drink happily." Murong Wanqing slammed the table and shouted, "Someone, change the wine bowl." Beside him, Luo Yuan used his arm to touch Jiang Yu's arm and whispered, "What happened to Wanqing recently? Ever since she met Xiang Nan, it seems that her anger has become more and more intense and she is always angry. Usually, she's not like this. Even if others hurry up and talk to her, she won't take a second look. However, to Xiang Nan, it's as if everything Xiang Nan does can affect her. Jiang Yu lowered his head and smiled, but did not say anything. Right, Wanqing. Jiang Yu raised her head and looked at Muron Wanqing. I wonder if you have any Qingxiang pills. Muron Wanqing was holding the wine bowl that she had just changed into, worrying about the big bowl of strong liquor. Wouldn't it be too ungraceful if she took a sip like this? Hearing Jiang Yu's question, she said, why would I use that kind of thing? Naturally, there is no such thing. At this point, Muron Wanqing was ruthless. She raised her head and took a few large mouthfuls of the strong liquor in the bowl. Then, she kept frowning and muttered to herself, a rough man is a rough man. How can a good wine be tasted when drinking like this? In another courtyard, Xiang Nan walked in with a bowl of wine. The second-grade students in the courtyard immediately stood up. Xiang Nan is here. Quickly come sit here. Come to my place. From now on, we will be fellow disciples of the second-grade academy. That's right. With your outstanding strength, you are destined to be in the same academy as us. Being with those first-grade students will bury your talent. Xiang Nan felt that it was strange. Today, not only were these second-grade students not hostile to him, they were even more enthusiastic. This sudden change made Xiang Nan confused. He clasped his fists and said, "Thank you for your kindness, senior brothers." Then Xiang Nan might as well obey respectfully. Come here, Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan looked for Yang Lianer's voice and walked over. He poured himself a bowl of wine and said, Senior Sister Yang, thank you for your generous gift of pills. Xiang Nan respects you with a bowl. Let's do it first. After saying that, he raised his hands and drank a few large mouthfuls of wine. Then, he poured another bowl of wine. He raised the bowl high with both hands and said, This bowl is for senior brothers and sisters. Let's do it first. After saying that, he drank a few more mouthfuls. Quite a few people at the scene secretly gave him a thumbs up, thinking to themselves that this was the happiest man. As Yang Liener watched Xiang Nan drink, his throat twitched. She watched the scene of the strong liquor flowing down his neck and said in a voice that only she could hear, This Xiang Nan really has some manliness. If I could get to know him earlier, maybe. What a pity. I like such a hero. A second-grade student stood up and laughed heartily. He also put on a big bowl and said, This drunken dream pavilion is good everywhere. However, there is one thing. Everything you do is too exquisite. It makes people feel like you can't let it go. Brother Xiang Nan seems to be someone with a good temper. I admire you. Come, senior brother, give you a bowl of wine in return. Xiang Nan laughed loudly and drank all of it with his senior brother. Following that, Xiang Nan kept on toasting and the others kept on returning the favor. Everyone exchanged glances and drank bowls after bowl. Finally, the displeasure in Xiang Nan's heart disappeared into thin air. Xiang Nan's alcohol tolerance is admirable. Yang Liener stood up and held up a small glass of wine. These are not ordinary drinks, but they are specially brewed from spiritual herbs for our martial artists. Junior apprentice brother Xiang Nan, I'm here to offer you a toast. As she spoke, Yang Liener walked to Xiang Nan step by step. Xiang Nan had just picked up the wine bowl to drink when he saw a white and tender arm coming from the inside of his arm. This was clearly the posture of a toast. Xiang Nan was stunned. Senior Sister Yang, this. However, Yang Liener had already hooked onto Xiang Nan's arm and drank the wine in the cup. After drinking, Yang Liener smiled sweetly at Xiang Nan. But at this moment, everyone's expressions changed. Just now, the lively scene of everyone laughing heartily had disappeared. Everyone had a smile on their faces as they looked outside the door. Xiang Nan held the wine bowl and felt puzzled. He turned around and saw 4 people standing at the entrance of the academy. The first person was the so-called number 1 expert of the 2nd grade academy, Jiang Cheng, whom he saw at the entrance of the credit hall a few days ago. At this moment, dark clouds covered Jiang Cheng's face as he coldly looked at Xiang Nan and Yang Liener's wine exchange. "Get your arm off." Jiang Cheng couldn't help but shout coldly at Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan was not stupid. With a single glance, he could tell that Jiang Cheng was obviously interested in Yang Liener. Although Jiang Cheng's tone was not good, Xiang Nan was too lazy to care about other people's personal affairs. He put down the wine bowl and prepared to move aside. At this moment, Jiang Cheng strode towards Yang Liener. However, Yang Liener pitifully grabbed Xiang Nan's arm and whispered, "Junior brother Xiang Nan, protect me. He wants to hurt me." Xiang Nan had a bad impression of Jiang Cheng. Seeing that Jiang Cheng was pressing towards Yang Liener with a livid face, and thinking that Yang Liener was really nice to him, he stopped and said to Jiang Cheng, "Senior brother Jiang, you have something to say. Don't be impulsive." This Jiang Cheng probably liked Yang Liener, but he couldn't catch up with her for a long time, so he became angry from embarrassment, right? "Who are you?" Jiang Cheng was instantly enraged as he shouted at Xiang Nan, "It's your turn to judge me. Get lost. What are you talking about?" Originally, Xiang Nan was only trying to persuade him with good words, but now he couldn't bear it anymore. He even took a step forward and said, "Other people don't like you, so you can't force this kind of thing." Jiang Cheng was blocked by Xiang Nan, so he stopped and looked down at Xiang Nan condescendingly. The cost of ginger was half a head higher than Xiang Nan's. Looking at Xiang Nan like this made Xiang Nan feel very unhappy. "Oh. What you said seems to make sense." Jiang Cheng thought for a moment and said. Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Senior brother, you can't force yourself to chase after women. If you..." Before he could finish speaking, Jiang Cheng suddenly attacked without warning and punched Xiang Nan in the stomach. The two of them stood close to each other, and they were already very close to each other. In addition, Jiang Cheng was at the 5th level of the origin return stage, and Xiang Nan was completely defenseless. This punch landed heavily on Xiang Nan's stomach, preventing Xiang Nan from circulating his yuan qi to protect his body. "Pooh!" Xiang Nan coughed out a mouthful of sweet blood, and his feet left the ground, wiping the ground and flying backwards. Chapter 214 Utilization. Jiang Cheng's punch was not an ordinary fist. Instead, it used the power of yuan qi. A thick layer of yuan qi radiance wrapped around his heavy punch. Xiang Nan was unprepared and was ambushed by Jiang Cheng at close range. This fashion was flying backwards, and he had yet to react. As for the 2nd grade students behind him, they tacitly moved aside, and the 3 people behind Jiang Cheng also instantly attacked. An expert at the late stage of the 4 great origin realms shot out from the left and fell down in an instant. He used his right hand to press down on Xiang Nan's right shoulder, and a fierce yuan qi poured into his right body. That yuan qi was like a large net that pierced through his body. When Xiang Nan's yuan qi was blocked, he immediately used yuan qi to invade half of Xiang Nan's meridians. On the other hand, another 4th level origin return cultivator with a fat body chased after Xiang Nan from the right. He slapped him on the left shoulder and used his Yuan Qi to invade Xiang Nan's meridians. The two of them, one on the left and one on the right, took Jiang Cheng's attack in a flowing manner and pressed Xiang Nan heavily onto a chair. The cooperation of these three people was simply too tacit. Ever since Jiang Cheng's sneak attack on Xiang Nan caused Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi to become chaotic, the two of them took the opportunity to invade Xiang Nan's meridians, as if they had already rehearsed this many times and were extremely skilled. The short man who had once used his shoulder to hit Xiang Nan was also a 4th level origin returning expert. He was as nimble as a monkey and half squatted in front of Xiang Nan. He stretched out his palm horizontally and used his Yuan Qi to transform into a radiant blade. The blade firmly pressed against Xiang Nan's spiritual sea. The tip of the blade had pierced through a bit of his skin, and traces of blood had already flowed out, continuously falling down the blade. Move again and your cultivation will be ruined. The short man licked his lips and laughed. Just as Xiang Nan wanted to resist, he felt the right side of his body tremble, and a heart-wrenching pain suddenly appeared. Believe it or not, I can destroy your meridians before you circulate your Yuan Qi. Instead, Xiang Nan calmed down and quietly watched what they were going to do. Good boy. Jiang Cheng strode toward Xiang Nan and said, "What a romantic sweetheart. You are not satisfied with seducing the demonic woman of the heavenly devil sect, yet you actually dare to hit on Liener." After saying this, Jiang Cheng punched out his heart and punched Xiang Nan's chest. The tall, thin man and the fat man had a tacit understanding of how to stabilize Xiang Nan's body and injected Yuan Qi into the wooden chair, so that the wooden chair wouldn't be shattered by Jiang Cheng's fist. Xiang Nan was sitting on a chair. He was beaten 3 to 4 meters backwards and spat out another mouthful of blood. "Jiang Cheng, are you done?" Yang Liener said angrily, "What else do you want?" In other words, she didn't have the slightest intention of rushing forward to help Xiang Nan out of the encirclement. Meanwhile, the second-grade students who drank with Xiang Nan and called them brothers were all standing by the side with their shoulders crossed. "Liener." Jiang Cheng hurriedly ran to Yang Liener and said, "It's all my fault. Can't I admit my mistake? Are you wrong?" Yang Liener angrily turned her head and snorted, "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Cheng smiled and said, "Yes, I went out to drink flower wine with my brothers that day. I did find 2 girls, but I, Jiang Cheng, swear to the heavens that I definitely didn't touch those 2 girls." "Bah! Who would believe you? Men are all virtuous." As she spoke, Yang Liener glanced at Xiang Nan indifferently. This time, there was a look of disgust in her eyes. Previously, when she first met Xiang Nan, she was so knowledgeable and reasonable, and her smile was sweet. However, today, she had changed her expression, just like the 2 completely different people before and after her. The men she was talking about were all of the same virtue, and they were clearly mapping between Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly. "Really, really. Trust me, I only have you in my heart." Jiang Cheng went to grab Yang Liener's arm, but Yang Liener dodged angrily. Jiang Cheng went to catch her again. This time, Yang Liener struggled twice before she was pulled into Jiang Cheng's embrace. Jiang Cheng said softly, "Don't you know how good I am to you?" Just as Yang Liener was about to speak, she was stopped by Jiang Cheng's domineering tone. At this time, everyone present clapped their hands and cheered, some of them still whistling and coaxing. After the kiss, Yang Liener's face flushed red and she lightly hammered Jiang Cheng's chest twice. "You're dead, you're dead." Jiang Cheng laughed heartily and hugged Yang Liener. "Liener, let's get back together, okay?" Young Lianer lowered her head in extreme embarrassment, her voice as soft as a mosquito's. Seeing this scene, Xiang Nan finally understood that he had drilled into a trap set by someone else. No wonder when Jiang Qing first arrived, not a single second-grade student went up to protect Yang Lianer, but he was the only idiot who wanted to speak up for her. After a long time, Jiang Qing and Yang Lianer were originally a pair. It's a tantrum between lovers. Recently, Xiang Nan's reputation had been rather messy. Yang Lianer had just borrowed a knife to kill and used Xiang Nan to anger Jiang Qing. If she was using someone else, she would definitely not be able to achieve such a good result. However, Xiang Nan was one of the outstanding talents among the rising stars, so Jiang Qing couldn't help but be anxious. I know you're purposely mad at me. Don't do this in the future, okay? Jiang Qing gently held Yang Lianer's chin. I see. Yang Lianer smiled sweetly and obediently, but her face turned red from embarrassment. Ha ha ha. Just as the two of them were tired of it, Xiang Nan suddenly laughed loudly. What face do you have to smile at? Jiang Qing turned his head to look at Xiang Nan and said coldly, how can you touch my woman? A toad really wants to eat swan meat and miss a woman so much that she misses you. However, Xiang Nan stared at Yang Lianer and nodded, it's good that you used me. Yang Lianer smiled apologetically, Xiang Nan, I've wronged you. I know that you already have a good impression of me, but my heart belongs to Jiang Qing. However, it doesn't matter. I'll give you a few more tier 2 pills to compensate you when I get back. Do I have a good impression of you? Xiang Nan raised his head and smiled, Yang Lianer, you think too much, don't you? I'm just thanking you for the pill. Out of courtesy, I came to propose a toast to you. Xiang Nan said angrily, but the two of you are really full. Do you guys have a relationship with me? Yang Lianer, how the hell did I offend you? There's no need to plot against me like this. Ever since you pretended to give me the Foundation establishment pill at Sun Peak, you've been laying it out for me, right? I was foolish enough to think that you really wanted to make friends with me. Who are you talking to? I don't know what you're talking about. Jiang Qing heard Xiang Nan say, what the hell, to Yang Lianer and rushed forward with another punch. This punch directly smashed into Xiang Nan's face, causing Xiang Nan's entire body to tilt. Hey Xiang Nan, are you alright? We are all waiting for you to return. At this moment, a disciple of a first-grade academy pushed open the door and entered. In an instant, the disciple saw Jiang Qing punch Xiang Nan in the face. His face was suddenly shocked. He turned around and ran, come quickly. Xiang Nan has been surrounded by people from the second-grade academy. Chapter 215 Counterattack. Xiang Nan's thoughts were quite simple. Earlier, he had beaten up Li Hai of the second-grade academy, but later, Yang Lianer of the second-grade academy was able to ignore past grudges and take the initiative to show her goodwill. Others came up with smiling faces, and Xiang Nan was embarrassed to face them back with a dark face. They were willing to take the initiative to clear up their past grudges, so Xiang Nan got off the donkey along the slope. However, he didn't expect that all of this was just a scheme. Perhaps even today's banquet had been planned by them together. They wanted to use themselves to make Yang Lianer and Jiang Qing reconcile. On the other side, when the students of the first-grade academy heard that Xiang Nan had been beaten up, they all rushed out. More than 100 people entered the courtyard where Xiang Nan was currently, blocking the entrance to the courtyard. Meanwhile, Murong Wanqing and the other 5 descendants of aristocratic families rushed to the front. Murong Wanqing thought that she was still drinking a few moments ago. She rushed over with the wine jug in her hand. The moment she saw Xiang Nan's current situation, the wine jug in her hand was crushed. When Jiang Qing saw Murong Wanqing, there was a hint of timidity on his face. Murong Wanqing's expression changed very quickly. The first time she saw Xiang Nan, her face became sullen, but then she became ice cold. Xiang Nan, I'll listen to your words on how you plan to solve today's matter. We forced you here today. As long as you're not scared, we'll accompany you to the end. Xiang Nan had originally lowered his head and was bleeding from the corner of his eyes. At this moment, he let out a long breath and raised his head with a faint smile. Don't let go of any of them. Murong Wanqing's eyes lit up. She knew that Xiang Nan would not be so afraid of anything. Even if she drank Zhao Qi. Before she could finish speaking, Feng Zhaoqi had already bowed and pulled out his sword. However, the crowd could only see his bright sword twitching rapidly, as if it hadn't left the sheath of the sword. Immediately after, there were 3 flashes of light. None of them saw his movements. On the contrary, the 3 experts who controlled Xiang Nan seemed to be facing a great enemy. They immediately gave up control of Xiang Nan and erected a Yuan Qi shield in front of them. Immediately after, ear-piercing sounds of cutting could be heard from the 3 shields. None of the 3 slender sword beams had ever sliced out. At this moment, they were fiercely cutting through the 3 shields, cutting out a long string of sparks that flew into the sky. So fast. The second-grade students were stunned. It wasn't just them, even the first-grade students' faces turned pale from fear. This was the first time Feng Zhaoqi had attacked in public. Moreover, he still didn't see how he attacked. Soon after, Luo Yuan, Shen Linhai, and Jiang Yu caught up. Shen Linhai of the Saber sect was at the 3rd level of the Origin Return Realm, and Jiang Yu of the Qi sect had just advanced to the 3rd level. The 2 of them chose the fatty at the 4th level of the Origin Return Realm as their target. Shen Linhai jumped into the air, holding a 2-meter hammer in his hand. With the addition of the primordial dipper Qi, he smashed heavily at the fat man. The fat man's strength was also quite extraordinary. His fat flesh trembled all over his body. He actually raised both of his hands and used his palms to support Shen Linhai's heavy hammer. However, the power of this hammer was too frightening. It forcefully nailed the lower half of the fatty's body to the ground. Jiang Yu crossed her hands and aimed at the fat man. She circulated 3 revolutions of astral qi in her body. With a cold shout, a heavy Yuan Qi cannon suddenly spat out from her palm. Playing with Yuan Qi, no one could compare to the Qi sect. Shen Linhai turned his hand around and smashed the heavy hammer towards the big fatty's back. Jiang Yu's Yuan Qi cannon just hit the big fatty's chest. This pincer attack had practically blasted the fat man's body all over. Pooh! The fat man raised his head and spat out a mist of blood. On the other side, Saber Sect's Luo Yuan used a good palm technique. His arms were wrapped in a hazy Yuan Qi. As he moved his palm, his arms transformed into light shadows, as if he had 6 arms at the same time. Illusory palm shadows continuously attacked the skinny expert. The skinny expert drew out a long spear and the spear shadows scattered like rain, while Luo Yuan swam freely in the dense spear shadows like his ghostly palm technique. Feng Zhaoqi took a step forward, and with a thumbs-up sound, the hilt of the sword was pushed out halfway. Then, the sword moved, and the sword did not leave its sheath. However, there was a series of intense ding-ding-ding-ding-ding sounds coming from the scene. Every single shadow of the thin and tall primordial air gun was sliced off by the sword light. Luo Yuan happened to be bullying his body and gently placed his palm on the tall and thin man's body. The tall and thin man was shocked. He thought to himself, why is this palm so weak and powerless? However, Luo Yuan laughed out loud and leaned against his tall and thin stomach as he suddenly moved forward. Immediately after, a huge palm print appeared on the skinny and tall man's forebody. The palm print covered a wide area, much larger than Luo Yuan's right hand. Pooh! The tall and thin man also spat out a large mouthful of blood as he fell backwards. These people all attacked at the same time, their speed was extremely fast. At this moment, Xiang Nan had already stood up from his chair and was twisting his neck to stretch his muscles and bones. The only one missing was the short man, who was walking around like a spirit monkey in the crowd. He first circled behind the fat man and didn't see how he attacked. Shen Linhai's heavy hammer was pushed out. Then, his body swayed and he was attacking the tall and thin Luo Yuan. He was suddenly thrown into the air by a force. Hey, are you guys going to catch? Pine. Xiang Nan stomped on the short man's back and stomped him flat on the ground. The short man's body shook and he broke free from Xiang Nan's feet, turning into an afterimage and shooting towards the side. Xiang Nan was quick-witted. The moment the short man left, he stretched out his arm and grabbed the short man's ankle. At this moment, the short man was maintaining the posture of rushing out. In addition to the strength of Xiang Nan's grabbing, his entire body was temporarily in the air. Xiang Nan grabbed the short man's ankle and jumped up to a height of 50 meters. Then, he poured Yuan Qi into his right leg and kicked him vertically. When he kicked him in mid-air, Yuan Qi exploded. The terrifying Yuan Qi pushed Xiang Nan towards the ground. Xiang Nan even used the flash shadow step to reach the ground in a flash. He slammed the short man to the ground fiercely. With a loud explosion, a crater 10 meters in diameter was smashed into the ground, and even the surrounding walls were shaken to the point that they collapsed. Little flea, you should jump one more time. Xiang Nan looked down at Shorty condescendingly, aren't you going to pierce through my spiritual sea? The short man's bones had long since been broken. His entire body was on the verge of death, without any reaction. The tall and thin man who had been rescued by the short man had already sneaked up on Xiang Nan's back. Xiang Nan raised his right hand high, and with a clanging sound, a huge saber flew up. His right hand accurately grabbed it, and he turned around and kicked it. At the third level of origin return, Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi was already abundant, so he no longer stingily used Qi refinement to turn it into electricity. Usually, refining Qi into electricity consumed a lot of Yuan Qi. Only when he used the Thunder King seal would Xiang Nan be willing to use it. Now, he had used this move with a single kick. Crackling lightning wrapped around Xiang Nan's right leg, which pierced through his heart and stomped straight on the tall and thin left knee. Gotcha! The sound of bones shattering could be heard. The tall and thin man was kicked to pieces by Xiang Nan's knee, and his entire body slipped backwards, smashing the wooden chair into pieces with his buttocks, while his calf on his left leg tilted upwards in horror. Chapter 216 Stupid Woman. Even though Jiang Yu and Shen Linhai had already taught him a lesson, this fatty was also an expert of the Qi sect, and he had practiced a strange technique of softness. Jiang Yu and Shen Linhai's attacks caused him to spit out blood, but he did not injure any of his muscles, bones, or organs. At this moment, the fat man's body trembled, and an unimaginably soft Yuan Qi wrapped around his body. Shen Linhai's hammer smashed onto the fatty's Yuan Qi and was bounced back with a buzzing sound. Jiang Yu's right fingers formed a sword and shot out a blade of essence sword towards the fat man. The fat man slapped his hands, causing the fat flesh on his arms to tremble. In front of the collision of his palms, a soft ball of origin energy was condensed, and the ball of light was still spinning. Jiang Yu's essence sword blade directly shot into the essence sphere. The sphere shook with a grunt, then swung it upwards, drawing the essence sword blade into the air. On the side, Xiang Nan strode over and placed his palm on the fat man's fat flesh, refining qi into lightning. In an instant, the fat man who gave Jiang Yu and Shen Linhai a headache was actually wrapped in crackling lightning, and his entire body floated into the air. Under the electric shock, the fat man's throat let out a giggle, but he was speechless. Xiang Nan's eyes turned cold, for people ambushed one of me. You guys are so proud. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiang Nan's yuan qi surged out. The lightning that wrapped around the fatty suddenly turned into a ball of lightning with a diameter of 2 meters. The fatty was shrouded in the ball of lightning. The bullet straightened his body, causing his fat body to spasm rapidly. His eyes rolled white, and he continuously spat out white foam mixed with blood. Hiss! Lightning meridians! Everyone present was shocked. Even Muron Wanqing and the others cried out in shock. Xiang Nan loosened his right hand, and the thunderball disappeared. After the fat man landed on the ground, his eyes continued to roll and twitch. After witnessing the entire process, Yang Lianer was so shocked that her face turned pale that she couldn't say a single word. Yang Lianer. Xiang Nan turned to look at Yang Lianer and said, I have no grievances or enmity with you, yet you are plotting against me like this. Didn't you guys join forces to play tricks on me? Since that's the case, you have to be prepared to pay the price. Yang Lianer was also enraged. She pointed at Xiang Nan's nose and scolded, I'm using you. What's wrong? What kind of good person are you? You're already in disrepute for being entangled with the heavenly demon sex demonic woman. Do you still care about being used by me this time? I'm afraid you've broken a pot yourself. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes. Is it because of you that I'm infamous? Even if I'm reduced to being scolded by tens of thousands of people, it's not your turn to judge. Why are you pretending to be an obedient girl with me? You are just a slut with a quiet exterior and a dirty heart. You bitch. You, Yang Lianer pointed at Xiang Nan, her entire body trembling with anger, you called me a bitch, yet you actually dared to call me a bitch. Xiang Nan was truly enraged. He had been feeling extremely aggrieved during this period of time. He had saved a person and was still a heavenly devil cult demonic woman. Furthermore, he had been unknowingly proposed by the heavenly devil cult, making him famous. Now that she wanted to make friends with Yang Lianer with good intentions, she unexpectedly fiercely plotted against her. All of this had finally caused Xiang Nan to erupt. I treat others with kindness and do nothing to humiliate me. How dare you scold Lianer? She is the daughter of the Yang clan of Haotian City. The time for Jiang Cheng's performance had finally come. He rushed forward and was about to attack Xiang Nan. It turned out that Yang Lianer was a member of the Yang clan, one of the 4 great clans of Zhou Chu, Hong, and Yang in Haotian City. No wonder she could mobilize so many people to cooperate with her in a play. But who was Xiang Nan afraid of? Not to mention the Yang clan of Haotian City, he was the disciple of a great figure in Haojing. Now that the 5th level origin returning expert Jiang Cheng had rushed over, Xiang Nan did not back down and was ready to catch up. But at this moment, Muron Wanqing took a step forward and slapped Jiang Cheng's face fiercely. Pa! That crisp sound echoed throughout the entire arena. This slap landed on Jiang Cheng's face in front of the crowd. A red handprint was printed on Jiang Cheng's face. Jiang Qing covered his face and looked at Muron Wanqing in disbelief. He actually didn't dare to retaliate. Jiang Qing. Muron Wanqing's face was cold and gloomy. You are a little person who is subservient to the flames. When I came to the Haran sect earlier, you were still chasing after me. Now that you've climbed this high branch of the Yang clan, you don't know your surname anymore. You even dare to move my people. Perhaps she wanted to say that even the people I invited to the celebration banquet were my people. Fortunately, the situation was intense and no one noticed this detail. What? You chased after Muron Wanqing? Yang Lianer was already angry, but after hearing Muron Wanqing's words, she became even angrier. This Jiang Qing was indeed a true expert. His strength was at the peak of the second-grade academy, but at the same time, he had a strong sense of vanity. His background was very ordinary. Originally, he was able to rise to prominence with his outstanding martial arts skills. However, he was too envious of those large clans. Those aristocratic clans had lived a decent life. He had risked his life to get into them. This was the reason why he was so scared that he didn't dare to retaliate when the 5 of them arrived. He didn't dare to offend the big clans at all. Lianer, listen to me. I didn't meet you back then. My love for you. Pa! Muron Wanqing slapped Jiang Qing's face again, causing him to stagger. Muron Wanqing took another step forward and slapped him with her third palm. Jiang Qing didn't even dare to dodge. Just like that, he was slapped 3 times by a woman. He was afraid that the big clans were already afraid to such an extent. Even the students of the second-grade academy were dumbfounded. Who dares to mess around in the Drunken Dream Pavilion? The Drunken Dream Pavilion's martial artist guards finally arrived. They turned into shadows and stood at the edge of the ruins of the broken courtyard wall. Retreat, it's not your turn to take care of this place. Jiang Yu scolded coldly. As soon as the martial artist guards saw Jiang Yu's appearance, they all retreated. Yes, Mississippi. However, when they saw the chaotic scene, how could they really leave? They all stood far away, ready to protect Jiang Yu at any time. Xiang Nan had originally planned to fight Jiang Qing, but Muron Wanqing slapped Jiang Qing's face. If he rushed forward and had another mixed doubles match, the scene would be a bit embarrassing. Enough, stop fighting! Yang Lianer screamed. Muron Wanqing turned her head to look at Yang Lianer and said, "You started this. You said it was over. What do you think I am? Today is my banquet, yet you dare to ruin my banquet. You clearly don't take me seriously. I was wrong. I apologize." Yang Lianer cried and said to Xiang Nan, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used you. Quickly tell Muron Wanqing to stop and stop hitting Jiang Qing." Speaking of which, Muron Wanqing was extremely angry. Yang Lianer, this woman really doesn't know what's good for her. Doesn't she know what kind of person Jiang Qing is? She's actually protecting him. As a woman, Muron Wanqing felt that Yang Lianer was not worth it. Chapter 217 Dark Night Assault. Yang Lianer had already apologized on the spot. Xiang Nan didn't know what to do. His anger hadn't dissipated yet, but he couldn't hit a woman. Could it be that he kicked Yang Lianer in the stomach and sent her flying? Forget it. Xiang Nan shook his head and sighed. Forget it? Muron Wanqing was stunned. They humiliated you like this, so forget it? Could it be that you? Muron Wanqing took a look. The tall, thin man and the fat man had been beaten half to death. They were lying on the ground, breathing out more and breathing in less. Jiang Qing was slapped in the face in front of the crowd, and his long hair fell apart like a madman in a sorry state. In the end, only Yang Lianer was left. Murong Wanqing shook her head helplessly. Forget it. Never mind. What else can I do? It would definitely not be appropriate for a grown man like Xiang Nan to hit a woman. She was a woman. Could it be that she wanted to fight Yang Lianer by pulling her hair? How could Murong Wanqing do such a thing? What are you doing? At this moment, a female voice suddenly came from outside the courtyard. Everyone looked around and saw that Mu Sueki and a few envoys from other sects were passing by. Those messengers were here to lead the way. The patrol team of the Haran sect was leaving tomorrow. As the representative of the Haran sect's disciples, Mu Sueki was here tonight to entertain the envoys of other sections. In the end, she saw this scene. As such, Mu Sueki frowned. She really felt that she had no face in front of outsiders. Sister. You're here. When Jiang Qing saw his god-sister, he immediately grabbed onto the straw. He pointed at Xiang Nan and said, "Sister, you want to avenge me? He brought someone to bully your brother. How shameless." Even the second-grade students couldn't bear to watch this scene anymore. Jiang Qing didn't dare to offend Murong Wanqing and the others, so he could only pick up that soft persimmon and pinch it. He actually pointed the spear at Xiang Nan. "It's you." When Mu Sueki saw Xiang Nan, she frowned and said, "Wait here, don't leave." After saying that, Mu Sueki smiled and continued to send the messengers of the other sects into the courtyards that had been prepared in advance, and then returned. "Xiang Nan, come with me. I have something to say to you." Regardless of the situation, Mu Sueki grabbed Xiang Nan's arm and flew into the sky like a streak of light. There was no other way. Mu Sueki was a Heaven Origin Realm expert, and Murong Wanqing and the others could not stop her. Look at Jiang Qing again. That's a complacency. "Xiang Nan, just wait for me. My god-sister will definitely take good care of you." In the distance, Mu Sueki brought Xiang Nan out of the Drunken Dream Pavilion and arrived at a remote alley in Haotian City. As soon as she landed, Mu Sueki frowned and said, "Do you know why I brought you out for questioning?" Xiang Nan nodded. "Well, you want to give me face in front of everyone. It's good to know." Mu Sueki said, "As a woman, I know that I will give you face amongst my disciples. You are a grown man, but you have humiliated our Haran sect here." Xiang Nan had no room to refute Mu Sueki's words, so he could only remain silent. Mu Sueki added, "Do you know how much Yunfan thinks of you? The person he mentioned the most to me during this period of time is you, Xiang Nan. The fact that you were able to quickly reach the top of the Eagle rankings shows that you have extraordinary talent. However, this talent is not something that you can use to dominate and humiliate your fellow disciples. You are someone that Yunfan valued. I can't just watch as you go astray and walk into the corrupt path." "Am I going to the corrupt path?" Xiang Nan smiled. "You didn't ask about the cause and effect, but you blamed me. Why didn't you ask your good brother what he did?" "That's right, I have had contact with the demonic woman of the heavenly devil religion. That's why you have identified me as someone who wants to go evil in your heart." Mu Sueki was also rendered speechless by Xiang Nan's rebuttal. Although she did not think so, she did have such an impression subconsciously. Xiang Nan said, "I didn't show my face to the Haran sect. If you ask me, I admit it. But I didn't start this today." Mu Sueki said, "Tell me what exactly happened." Just as Xiang Nan was about to speak, he suddenly felt that his entire body was enveloped in invisible killing intent. Xiang Nan thought to himself, "Not good." He grabbed Mu Sueki's arm and was about to take her out. Xiang Nan's powerful killing intent perception was actually slightly stronger than Musweki's. The nearby killing intent was extremely weak and almost impossible to detect. However, Musweki did not react. She instinctively dodged the arm that Xiang Nan had grabbed. Immediately after, 3 shadows rushed out of the darkness. The 3 shadows' yuan qi was so dense that it could not penetrate the air. In an instant, they blocked Musweki. Then, with a flash, the 3 of them carried one person and floated into the night sky. Shit! Xiang Nan was suddenly shocked. The 3 of them came for Musweki with very clear intentions. They didn't even look at Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan felt his mind buzzing, almost exploding. No matter who's in trouble, Musweki can't be in trouble. Her identity is too sensitive. First, she was going to be the representative of the Haran sect and go out with her mentors to other sections. Second, she was sent from the direction of Haojing to reconcile the relationship between the government and the sect. Regardless of the reason why the 3 of them had snatched Musweki away, they definitely couldn't let them take Musweki away. Xiang Nan did not hesitate at all. A flash of lightning flashed in his mind, and he immediately transformed his yuan qi feathered wings and chased after those people in the direction they escaped from. The place where he talked to Musweki was very remote, and he couldn't find any helpers at all. Moreover, this place was too far away from the Haran sect. If he went back to ask for help, he would probably delay the time. Xiang Nan had also risked his life, not hesitating to consume a large amount of yuan qi. He used the yuan qi lightning to wrap his yuan qi feathered wings in a dense amount of lightning in an instant. As a result, Xiang Nan's speed increased by an entire level, and his flight speed was extremely fast. However, even so, this method of flying with yuan qi feathered wings was still unable to catch up to the 3 Heaven Origin Realm experts who had taken Musweki away. The 3 of them had all come prepared. Each force was extremely tyrannical. They could instantly snatch away Musweki, who was at the first level of the Heavenly Yuan Realm. This meant that the 3 of them were at least above the first level of the Heavenly Yuan Realm. Little Sparrow, chase after him. Don't lose him. Xiang Nan shouted anxiously. The little bird immediately turned into a red shadow, and with a whoosh, the sky slid down, leaving behind a shallow red mark in the night sky. Master! Xiang Nan chased after Su Kaiyu and poured yuan qi into her throat, trying to wake Su Kaiyu up in this way. However, Haotian City was a bustling metropolis, and the Haran sect stood tall in the center of Haotian City, just in the center of the clamor. In order to avoid being disturbed by the noise of borrowing, the Haran sect actually had a sound barrier. Su Kaiyu definitely wouldn't be able to reach him, but Su Kaiyu hadn't given Xiang Nan a signaling order. Xiang Nan's heart was burning with anxiety. He could only bravely chase after him, but he didn't know how life and death would be if he chased after him. He could only resign himself to fate. Damn it, damn it. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and chased after Musweki all the way. No matter what, we must take Musweki back. Chapter 218 Hanged by a Thread. Xiang Nan had tried his best to catch up, but he still couldn't catch up. With his current speed, he could only guarantee that he wouldn't be thrown further and further away. As for catching up with a Heaven Origin Realm expert, there was no possibility at all. Xiang Nanyu chased after Musweki, his heart becoming more and more uncertain. He now had some hope that the 3 Heavenly Yuan Masters wanted to kill Musweki, not really kidnap Musweki. It was because only when they wanted to kill Musweki would they be able to avoid sleeping too much and find a place nearby to kill. If they only wanted to take Musweki away, then the sky would be high and the birds would fly. Xiang Nan definitely would not have a chance to catch up. It seems, their speed has slowed down a bit. In the sky, Xiang Nan used his lightning-like eyes, and his eyes were covered with a layer of lightning. It could be seen with the naked eye that the yuan qi fluctuations left in midair by the three experts were gradually weakening. The faster a martial artist flew, the more intense the yuan qi he consumed, and the stronger the yuan qi fluctuations that remained halfway. As the fluctuations weaken, it means that their speed is also decreasing. However, this place had already reached the boundaries of the Haran mountain range, and it could be said to be insignificant. Shit! Xiang Nan thought to himself. They really planned to kill Musweki and silence her. At this moment, a line of fire rushed down from the sky. The little bird landed on Xiang Nan's shoulder accurately, and a wing pointed at Xiang Nan in the right direction. Little Sparrow stopped chasing, which meant that they had already stopped. Xiang Nan's heart sank as he flew in the direction of the little bird's finger. He saw that Musweki was being restrained by three people on a mountain peak in front of him. She knelt on the ground, her left and right shoulders firmly pressed by the two people, while the third person stood opposite her, drawing out a bright dagger in his hand. Xiang Nan hurriedly landed on a dense ancient tree in the distance and watched the scene with his own eyes. At this moment, Xiang Nan's mind was spinning rapidly. Countless plans to rescue Musweki were swiftly skipped through his mind, and he calculated the feasibility of each plan. No matter what, regardless of which method Xiang Nan used, the probability of successfully rescuing Musweki was infinitely close to zero. Impossible, those were three Heaven Origin Realm experts. Not only would he not be able to save Musweki, he would also die. At this moment, Xiang Nan suddenly flashed with a bright light, and his expression instantly became resolute. It seems that I can only use this move. I wonder if it will work. In short, I must give it a try. On the other side of the mountain, a black-clothed man who was pressing down on Musweki whispered, "That kid from the city earlier chased after him and was hiding nearby to peek." He thought that he was hiding very well. When Musweki heard this, she was obviously stunned. Her face was filled with disbelief. She did not expect that Xiang Nan would actually chase after her and plan to rescue her. Isn't that brat going to die? These three were experts of the Heaven Origin Realm. The black-clothed man with the short sword lightly nodded his head. "It's fine to chase after him. We can just take care of him together. Sell him a flaw and force him. Let's see if he has the guts to show himself." As he spoke, the black-clothed man raised his short sword high up and made a posture of beheading Musweki. Musweki knelt on the ground, praying in her heart, "Xiang Nan must not be impulsive, don't come out to die." The short sword in the black-clothed man's hand froze in the air for about 2 seconds before he sneered, "Looks like that brat is also a greedy person who doesn't dare to show himself." At this point, the dagger yuan qi in the black-clothed man's hand was condensed. This time, it was really going to be chopped down. At this moment, a blurry afterimage suddenly flashed past. The shadow flashed past Musweki. The three Heaven Origin Realm experts were already prepared. The moment the blurry shadow flashed past, the three of them attacked at the same time, attempting to capture Xiang Nan. However, what they hadn't expected was that Xiang Nan's speed was actually so fast. He didn't seem to be an early Origin Realm martial artist at all. "I'm empty." The three of them were stunned at the same time. What kind of movement technique is this? Almost at the same time that Xiang Nan dragged Musweki away, a faint voice shouted, lightning trembled. As a result, there was a boom, followed by an explosion. Crystal blue fire wolves that covered the sky and earth rolled away, turning the surrounding area into a sea of blue flames. However, an attack of this level could not even injure the hair of a Heaven Origin realm expert. False vision. A black-clothed man saw the true purpose of this lightning trembled. The blue flames were not used to attack, but to block his line of sight. That brat's movement technique is very strange and fast. Everyone, concentrate and sense his yuan qi fluctuations. At this moment, from the blue flames, an afterimage flashed towards the east. That direction was the Haoran sect. Chase. The three black-clothed men discovered Xiang Nan's afterimage at the same time and transformed into three streaks of light. However, just as they were about to chase after him, another afterimage also rushed out from the sea of flames in the sky. Instead, it sped westward, heading in the opposite direction of the Haoran sect. To the east, the speed of the three black-clothed men was extremely fast, but the afterimage they were chasing instantly slowed down. When the afterimage flew 500 meters, it was almost an afterimage. However, once it exceeded 500 meters, it would only flap its enormous yuan qi feathered wings and move forward. The three of them rushed forward and surrounded him, but when they saw what was before them clearly, they were all shocked. It was actually a blurry Xiang Nan, and the one in his hand was not Mu Sueki, but Mu Sueki's long skirt. Lure the enemy away from his base. The black-clothed man with the short sword jumped into a rage and said, "Go in the opposite direction. That brat must have escaped to the west." Before leaving, another black-clothed man turned his head to look at the rapidly dissipating, vague Xiang Nan and asked curiously, "What the hell is this, Avatar?" In the west, the real Xiang Nan grabbed the real Mu Sueki and sneaked out of the sea of flames. After that, he used 20 consecutive flash steps. In less than 3 seconds, he rushed 5 kilometers away. Xiang Nan's current yuan qi content was already different from before. This flash shadow step could be used at least 40 to 50 times. However, the amount of yuan qi he had consumed earlier was too much. Now, 20 times was the limit. Earlier, Xiang Nan had used his avatar seal to rescue Mu Sueki. He first took Mu Sueki away with a flash step, and then a thunderclap blocked the vision of the 3 experts on the spot. Then, he used his avatar imprint to split up an avatar from the outside. He also let the avatar grab Mu Sueki's long skirt and flee towards the east in a flash. When the 3 experts were unable to see clearly, they could only sense Xiang Nan's yuan qi fluctuations. The powerful yuan qi erupted when the incarnation released the flash shadow steps, immediately attracting the 3 of them. It was at this time that the real Xiang Nan escaped. 5 miles west. "I can't escape." Mu Sueki looked at Xiang Nan gratefully, but she knew that it was almost impossible for her to escape the pursuit of 3 Heaven Origin realm experts. Chapter 219 Beneath the Karst Cave. "Xiang Nan, their target is me. Put me down and run away. You still have a chance." Mu Sueki persuaded. "Shut up." The things Xiang Nan experienced this time could be said to be soul-stirring in every moment, and every step he took was carefully calculated. He needed to calm down. He needed space and time to think, so when Mu Sueki tried to persuade him to escape, he felt a little impatient. Mu Sueki was shocked. She didn't expect that this junior brother would actually dare to berate her. "Yes." Xiang Nan's eyes lit up as he grabbed Mu Sueki and crashed into a mountain peak. There were a large number of cracks on the surface of the mountain, which must have been left behind by the demonic beasts. Xiang Nan grabbed Mu Sueki and flew directly into a crack. After entering the depths, he took out a huge saber and chopped down all the way until the 2 of them fell into a cold cave in the underground world. "This is futile. Even if the three of them can't see us underground with their naked eyes, they can still sense the yuan qi fluctuations of the two of us with their high and powerful cultivation realms. Mu Sueki said. Hurry up and hit me. Xiang Nan suddenly shouted at Mu Sueki. What? Hit you? Mu Sueki was stunned. Cut the crap. Hurry up and attack. With their speed, they will be chasing me here in less than 10 seconds. Quickly. Beat me to the point where I'm on the verge of death. Life and death were at stake. Xiang Nan didn't have the time to waste talking to her, and his tone was exceptionally strong. Mu Sueki was already smart. Her eyes lit up and she instantly understood Xiang Nan's thoughts. She quickly said, "Protect your spiritual sea and meridians." As soon as she finished speaking, Mu Sueki's palm landed on Xiang Nan's chest. With this palm strike, Xiang Nan coughed up a mad mouthful of blood. Immediately after, his body softened and there was no movement. Mu Sueki was so nervous that she almost burst into tears. She was afraid that she would beat Xiang Nan to death with a single palm because she didn't know what to do. But now, there was no time to test it. Mu Sueki gritted her teeth and struck her abdomen. At that moment, Mu Sueki subconsciously grabbed Xiang Nan's hand. She also felt her eyes darken and fainted. The higher a martial artist's realm was, the stronger their ability to sense yuan qi fluctuations would be. No matter how much Xiang Nan and Mu Sueki suppressed their yuan qi, breathing, heartbeat, and even the speed of their blood flow, they would not be able to escape the carpet-like search of the three heaven origin realm experts. Therefore, there was only one way to escape this dilemma, and that was to be on the verge of death. When a martial artist was on the verge of death, their spiritual qi would no longer circulate, and the yuan qi in their meridians would also stop. Even their breathing and heartbeat would drop to a freezing point. But whether he could escape this calamity or not, even Xiang Nan himself was not sure. After an unknown amount of time, Mu Sueki woke up first. When she discovered that she was still lying in the underground karst cave, her heart was filled with joy. Sure enough, they dodged. The fact that they hadn't been captured meant that the three heaven origin realm experts hadn't been able to find this place. But then, she became extremely anxious again, because Xiang Nan still didn't move. He quietly lay beside her without moving. He wasn't even able to breathe like a glimmer of air, and he didn't even breathe at all. Xiang Nan. Mu Sueki herself was as angry as a gossamer. She desperately wanted to call Xiang Nan, but her injuries were too severe. Even speaking became extremely strenuous. Xiang Nan, don't die. Mu Sueki pulled Xiang Nan's hand forcefully, but she couldn't exert any strength. Mu Sueki looked at her own situation and remembered that Xiang Nan had risked everything to save her, but in the end, she was killed by her own palm. Even someone as strong as Mu Sueki felt a burst of grievance in her heart, and she couldn't help but cry softly. She had rarely shed tears in her life, but this time, her tears were like broken beads that could not be stopped. She thought to herself, Xiang Nan and I don't have any friendship, but he was willing to sacrifice his life to save me, and in the end, he was personally killed by me. Forget it, Benefactor Blade, I have no face to continue living. Why don't I die with Xiang Nan and apologize to him on the road to hell? However, now that Mu Sueki could not even move, how could she have the strength to commit suicide? The more she felt wronged, the more she cried softly. Why are you crying? Cough. Suddenly, a weak male voice appeared. Mu Sueki was stunned for a moment and hurriedly turned her head to look. She saw that Xiang Nan had already breathed heavily. She didn't even know what language to use to describe her current mood. Instead, she was so stupid, staring at Xiang Nan all the time. Xiang Nan was also severely injured. He barely wanted to do it, but he tried a few times but failed. Isn't it just? I almost got robbed. Cough cough. As for crying. Xiang Nan frowned and turned to look at Musweki. He didn't know that Musweki wasn't crying because of this. Musweki felt a little embarrassed and didn't know how to explain. The two of them felt much more relaxed after surviving the catastrophe. They only needed to wait for their bodies to slowly recover. After they could circulate the vast heaven pure essence technique on their own, they would be able to heal themselves. But in this way, the two of them were speechless. Xiang Nan and Musweki weren't familiar with each other, so they didn't have anything in common. Musweki lowered her head and didn't know what was on her mind. As time passed, the atmosphere froze. Xiang Nan simply closed his eyes and recuperated. After a while, Musweki said weakly, "Oh right, what happened in Drunken Dream Pavilion earlier? Why did you fight so hard?" Xiang Nan glanced at Musweki and angrily told her everything. After hearing this, Musweki was so angry that her teeth itched. She said, "This Yang Liener is really spoiled by the family." "Yang Liener is spoiled. Is your good brother innocent?" Xiang Nan asked. Musweki sighed, "I don't really know Jiang Qing very well." As she spoke, Xiang Nan slowly understood the relationship between her and Jiang Qing. Actually, Jiang Qing had always been a noble person, and the first person he targeted was Musweki. At that time, Jiang Qing seemed to have gone crazy. Almost every day, he would find an opportunity to appear in Musweki's line of sight. He was constantly courting Musweki, sending her all kinds of delicious food and all kinds of small accessories. Although Musweki refused tactfully time and time again, Jiang Qing's skin was as thick as a city wall. He didn't care at all, and he still hissed at Musweki. Musweki was not a self-respecting woman, and she could not bear to refute Jiang Qing's face again and again. Slowly, she would occasionally chat with Jiang Qing. After Jiang Qing entered the second-grade academy, he became even more fierce and began to pursue Musweki crazily. At that time, Jiang Yunfan finally returned to the sect after a few months away. After Jiang Qing found out that Jiang Yunfan was interested in Musweki, he no longer dared to have any indiscriminate thoughts. But who was he, Jiang Qing? How could he give up like this? He changed his routine, no longer chasing after Musweki in the way of love between men and women. Instead, he was wholeheartedly determined to be Musweki's younger brother. Chapter 220 Causal Order. Obviously, Jiang Qing understood Musweki's temperament very well. He knew that Musweki was kind-hearted, so he made full use of her kindness. Later, in a public place, he publicly offered to recognize Musweki as his god-sister. Musweki still couldn't bear to publicly reject him. Although she didn't reject him, she didn't accept it either. From then on, Jiang Qing had been pretending to be Musweki's godbrother all day long, and when he saw Musweki, he also called her sister one by one. Musweki did not tire of it and could only do some missions frequently, looking for an opportunity to leave the Nature's Nature sect and go out to hide in peace. Ah, if this person is shameless, he is truly invincible. Xiang Nan couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. Xiang Nan knew about what happened afterwards. That Jiang Qing hit Muron Wanqing's mind. However, Muron Wanqing was not Musweki. She was definitely not that soft-hearted. Facing Jiang Qing's persistent attacks, Muron Wanqing directly slapped her. Jiang Qing was helpless, so he could only change his target again and chase after Yang Liener. However, This brat's reputation was not bad, because he was smart and did everything without leakage. In front of his target woman, he was as obedient as a dog. However, in front of his fellow disciples, he had always maintained a high and mighty demeanor, winning the respect of many people. However, in Drunken Dream Pavilion, Xiang Nan directly tore off his hypocritical mask, allowing his unknown side to be revealed in front of everyone for the first time. People like Jiang Qingmi faced the most. Mu Sueki said, "You have to be careful of him. You can be said to have ruined his image in Drunken Dream Pavilion. He will definitely hate you to the bone." "I'm not afraid." Xiang Nan's body recovered a little bit of its mobility, but he was still unable to use it. He barely leaned against a stalactite. As a result, the two of them had no more topics to discuss. After the two of them were embarrassed for a while, Xiang Nan said, "There are some things that should not have been said by an outsider like me, but since I saved your life, I will tell you. I think senior brother Yun Fan is really good. You should be able to tell that he is interested in you." "Yes, Yun Fan is not bad." Mu Sueki nodded her head, "Everything is excellent. It can be said that there are no shortcomings, but my heart is not with him." "So you already have someone you like?" Xiang Nan's heart sank and he was very worried about Jiang Yunfan. "Yes." Mu Sueki gave a soft hum and her face turned red. "Who can make your eldest senior sister Mu miss you so much?" "I'd like to hear it," Xiang Nan said. Mu Sueki thought for a moment and said, "Many years ago, when I was a child, I was fortunate enough to go to the 9 Firmaments continent and watch the sect rankings." Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. He knew about the sect storm rankings. It was to select the best sects from the various continents, and then everyone would gather together to have the disciples of the sect fight. This was the same as the 12 sect joint examination, but on a larger scale. Mu Sueki said, "At that time, I saw a person's demeanor. He challenged all the disciples of the 7 great sects by himself. At that time, he was lofty, enjoying the respectful gazes of countless people, and he was dotted on by thousands of people. At that time, he really was filled with countless halos." Hearing this, Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, "This is not good." Sure enough, Mu Sueki had a look of infatuation on her face as she said, "He is known as the #1 genius under the starry sky. He is the heavenly profound sect's chief disciple, Bai Mukan." Xiang Nan was dumbfounded. The reincarnation of history was always full of drama. Back then, when Bai Mukan swept across the 7 great sects, he didn't know that there was a little girl secretly looking at his back with admiration. More than 10 years later, Bai Mukan was reborn as Xiang Nan, and he actually had some connection with that little girl and saved her life. Could it be that there was a certain amount of karma? All the karma had been calculated. Even if Xiang Nan was beaten to death, he would never have imagined that the person Mu Sueki liked was actually him. To be exact, it was him from his previous life. But, what do I count as? Mu Sueki smiled self-deprecatingly. "Back then, when I took a quick glance, I was unable to see him again today. Furthermore, he already had someone else in his heart, that is, the #1 beauty of the 9 Firmaments continent, Xian Qingzhu. Bai Mukan is already dead," Xiang Nan said. Mu Sueki raised her eyebrows and angrily said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Xiang Nan, let me tell you, if you dare to slander Bai Mukan one more time, I'm really anxious with you." Xiang Nan didn't know if he should be angry. She scolded herself to protect the previous him. This was a strange feeling. This was the first time Xiang Nan had encountered her. "I'm just guessing that Bai Mukan isn't as perfect as you think. If I were Bai Mukan, I would still think that senior brother Yunfan is more suitable for you, said Xiang Nan. Let's not talk about that anymore. Mu Sueki shook her head. No matter what, it's impossible for Bai Mukin to take a fancy to me. What's the use of saying those things? The two of them were speechless again. After a while, Mu Sueki suddenly turned to look at Xiang Nan and said, "Sometimes, I feel that you and Bai Mukin are somewhat similar." No. Xiang Nan panicked and hurriedly shook his head. "I'm not talking about looks." Mu Sueki said, "You seem to be like Bai Mukin. Normally, you look humble and peaceful. You always treat others with kindness. But I can see that you and his bones are hiding an undetectable ruthlessness. When you don't make a move, you are like a modest gentleman. If I were to be ruthless, I would be completely ignorant. I wish I could poke a hole in the heavenly capital." Xiang Nan was unable to refute it. In fact, the situation he had displayed recently was indeed the same. So, Mu Sueki began to carefully examine Xiang Nan, your charm, and him. "Shoo!" Xiang Nan suddenly raised a finger at his lips and said, "Don't talk." At this moment, a rustling sound suddenly came from the underground cave, as if rocks were rubbing against each other. Immediately after, a large lizard covered in crystal stones crawled over from the depths of the cave. The big lizard saw Xiang Nan and the other two at a glance. Its body stiffened for a moment, and then it felt that Xiang Nan and the other two were extremely weak, and its eyes revealed a ferocious expression. "Shit!" Xiang Nan broke out in cold sweat. Level 1 Origin Return, 5-colored lizard. Mu Sueki was also nervous. At this moment, the two of them were too weak and weaker than an ordinary commoner. Today, there were really uneven waves after waves. It was not easy to escape the pursuit of 3 Heaven Origin Realm experts. If he died under the hands of such a beast, then the joke would be really big. Just as the lizard was about to charge forward, a line of fire flew out from behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan was stunned, then laughed loudly, "Little sparrow, kill it. Quick, kill it." Mu Sueki was stunned and said to Xiang Nan, "I just said that you are somewhat similar to Bai Mukin. I withdraw these words. Bai Mukin wouldn't be so rude." Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle.